Okay. Good morning. Welcome to the Corporation Township Portage August 16, 2023 council meeting, virtual meeting by electronic participation and in-person at the Portage Community Center. So I'd like to call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the roll call. Councilor Bailey.
Present.
Councilor Hurst.
Present.
Councilor Goyda.
Present.
And I, Councilor Johnson Poulos, I'm present as well. I'm filling in for Mayor Seeley, who's on vacation. So let's have a moment of reflection. Thank you. So let's move on to confirmation of agenda. Ms. White Fox.
The council approved the August 16th, 2023 agenda as circulated, and the council approves the addition to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.4, questions received from council seeking additional information and the corresponding responses provided by staff. And that council approved the changes to the order of business to the agenda as follows. Advance item 9.3.3, report ADM 2023-039, Township Road Management Plan to directly following the disclosure of pecuniary interest. And advance item 9.3.5, report ADM 2023-041, Post Land Acknowledgement to directly following item 9.3.3, and advance the closed session to 1 p.m.
We have a mover and a seconder, moved by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? Good, thank you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature, general nature thereof. Any? None. Thank you. Okay, let's move into item 9.3.3, report ADM 2023-039, Township Roads Management Plan. Have a resolution. Ms. Whitlock.
So that report ADM 2023-039 regarding the Township of Pleasant Roads Management Plan be received for information.
Okay, so we have somebody to move and second it to bring it into discussion. Moved by Council Hurst, second Council Goyda. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, so where we going to start? Robert, are you starting or is it Matt?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you very much for allowing us to attend this meeting. Myself, Robert Gallivan from GM Blue Plan is here today. And Matt Scott as well from GM Blue Plan is here. And also Andrew Ostensky from Paradigm Engineering is going to be attending shortly. I don't see him on the list as of yet, but we're here to answer any questions that you have in regards to the report that we have developed and has been with the township and has been out to the public for questions. And we received a number of questions already, which we have provided some answers to as well. But yeah, we'll open it up to council to ask us any questions that you may have.
Okay, so I'd like to suggest that we go around the table. Anybody has questions, and then I'd like to jump into a series of recommendations that were made, section 10, and go through those, as well as addressing some of the 4 items that council asked to outline the report: edge lines, speed bumps, solar panels, and speed limits. So we'll start with you, Council Bailey.
Thank you. I guess I just have a few high level questions and I apologize for not getting them in ahead of time, putting you on the spot today. And some of these actually are directed as well to staff. So the first one I have is I'm just trying to understand how our current asset management plan and this new roads management plan integrate. I'm sort of seeing a lot of crossover and I'm not understanding which plan, which sort of takes priority when we're doing road assessment.
Mike, are you the person to answer this?
I can speak to it just as it relates, and then Mike can add to it if he'd like. So we are in the process of implementing the asset management system. And so all of the results of the roads management plan will be incorporated in that system. We are also working on our capital budget and forecast. And so the schedule of road rehabilitation projects that are noted in the transportation master plan, as well as the costs noted in there, would be incorporated in the 2024 capital budget and forecast. So they definitely do integrate, Councillor Bailey. So we will ensure that the results of this plan, once approved by council, are incorporated in both the asset management system as well as the 10-year capital budget and forecast.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is something that might now be in the asset management plan could be modified. The timing might change based on now some of the new roads management plan.
Exactly.
Okay, and will that is timing enough that we'll be able to see it for budget time?
Yes, you will be able to see it in the capital budget and forecast. It's the prudent thing to do at this point, just because the cost estimates within the transportation master plan are significantly higher than what we budgeted in our capital budget and forecast. So it'll all be incorporated in there. Again, system implementations right now, the budget system is the priority that the finance department is working to implement. And then we can incorporate all of these results in the asset management system and work with our director of public works to ensure that the cost estimates remain accurate as years go by, because we know cost estimates are always changing. So it'll be easy to implement this type of, like, any potential increases in our system once it's implemented.
Okay, thanks for that. And then I don't know who to direct this question to, whether it's Robert or Andrew, but I'm just curious how the roads management plan would be affected if Vision Zero principles were to be adopted by the township at some point in the future.
Maybe I can pass that over to you, Andrew.
Sure. Yeah. So they would tie in with sort of the fundamental recommendation of the policies that are in the roads management plan. Traffic calming, speed limit reviews, community safety zones, those all feed into the concept of Vision Zero. So there would be similarities and complementary avenues between those concepts if they were adopted in the future.
Okay, great. In your experience, have you seen any Vision Zero, principles brought into plans like this?
Not in the plans specifically. They typically are sort of a standalone concept, but they tie in very closely with the content of what's in the RMP. They sort of feed in as a contributing factor to why the RMP has what it has in it.
That's great to hear. Okay, so moving on. Something that's come up, and I'm just referencing 8.1.1.2 for anyone that's looking at the plan. Talks about traffic calming based on the desired function of the road. And I'm struggling with the fact that we haven't sort of identified the actual function of our township roads. No one has said out loud, this is not for livability, this is not for recreation, this is just for the movement of of cars. Do you think there's a need to actually say out loud and establish the function of our roads so that we have that as a base when we have residents coming forward and saying, you know, it's really, it's hard to walk down my road. Then we have a response. We say, well, actually, the function of the road is this. So I guess my question is, do we need to be clear on what the desired function of the road is as we adopt this plan?
Since this sort of ties into traffic related issues, I can certainly talk about the function of the road, but Andrew, you may want to just talk about this in relationship to traffic and operations.
Yes, and forgive me, the section number was 8.1.1.2, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, that ties into the traffic calming piece, just in terms of we apply it based on sort of road function. We recognize that that is not necessarily clear in Push Lynch, so we've tried to define sort of urban and rural based on the hamlet designations. I don't know if that answers the question per se, but I can provide another answer if you would like.
Yeah, I guess maybe to staff too. I'm just anticipating having a lot of residents come forward and say, I'd like to be able to walk down my township road. And if we can just kind of have a response right away or have an answer and just say, look, we have decided that these roads are only for, you know, traffic, and therefore, you know, we're not going to look at a request, or we're going to say, yeah, you're right. We do think walking down county roads or township roads is really important. So we're going to, you know, look at your request. I just feel like that's a really big piece to this plan, and I'm just looking maybe to
Councilor
staff.
Bailey, the consultant did a change to one of the paragraphs associated with your specific question. Basically, I seem to recall the paragraph basically says that staff will not entertain any discussions where the complaint is strictly for walking down the road.
Right.
So that is already embodied someplace in this document. I
But
can't
it-
remember the specific paragraph.
Yeah, that addressed the walking, but then if someone just said, well, I'd like, because there's a lot of traffic on it. Right, and we can say, well, that's the purpose of the road. So thank you for your.
But I think the question with respect to a lot of traffic on it has to do with things like, is it infiltration, is it speeding, or that sort of thing. I think whoever does a complaint has to have a specific category that staff will check off and say, is this fall in that specific category?
So I would just like to be able to tell residents what the function of Maltby Road is. I would like to be able to say what the function of Victoria Road is. And I don't have a clear answer on that.
Robert?
I can speak to that, Mr. Mayor. Or John,
Yeah, sure.
I think within the township, we have to still realize that our road systems are a rural platform. We do not offer meter and a half wide shoulders that could accept safely walking or cycling or things like that. So I think the number one answer would be township is still, the infrastructure is still a rural platform infrastructure where we offer half meter shoulders. It is not the most ideal for walking. From a public works viewpoint, if I was to call out loud what our road system would be, it would be a commuter network. We are kind of the victims of being close proximity to the 401 with three major urban centers to our north, west, and south. And we are kind of caught in the middle. Majority of our traffic, whether it be increased traffic, truck traffic, is all related to one of these factors. So I think the number one concern would be how the township tries to address some of these issues, yet realizing that, you know, from an operation viewpoint, it's at least 2 to 3 times a week the 401 is shut down for one reason or another. emergency detour routes are placed. And with today's technology of GPS and certain apps, people's phones indicate the shortest distance to their destination. And unfortunately, it will run straight through our rural platform infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Fowler. So, Councilor Bailey, we can certainly have one of the recommendations that we asked for a definition of the rules along the lines of our director, Fowler said, and in consultation with the consultant.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mr. Fowle. That was, yeah, I really appreciated that response. I think it just needs to be said out loud. And kind of just established that what the reality is of what's happening through our township with all the traffic. Again, I'm not sure who to direct this question to. 8.1.2.1 talks about non-physical measures such as enforcement and education. And I'm just wondering what specifically that looks like. How do we educate folks living outside of the township? Is this something we need to budget for if it becomes a campaign? You know, what do non-physical measures look like?
Just to, before passing on to Andrew, Andrew probably has some comments related to that. Just regarding the education end of things, I know from my experience at the region of Waterloo that we had numerous education programs, and what those education programs look like depended on what we were trying to accomplish. Sometimes it was through signage, sometimes it was through the media, website, TV, radio, but also a lot through signage and pavement markings and so on. And regarding enforcement is always an issue. We can always, you know, request, or we've always had certain requests into the police to increase enforcement, but of course, their manpower is constrained, and they also have to deal with their own priorities within their jurisdiction. So that always becomes a bit of an issue. But just to give you a little bit of my experiences. But Andrew, you may want to follow up with some of your background.
I can just clarify that non-physical is primarily education and enforcement. Education can also include technology that sort of communicates back to the driver. So speed radar signs are an example. They're non-physical in that they don't modify the roadway, but they educate motorists as to their speed if they may not be aware in that moment of time how fast they are driving. So that is a distinction. Physical is physically altering the roadway. That could be pavement markings, that could be speed humps, but non-physical does not alter the roadway in itself.
Okay, great. So maybe that does have some budget implications if we're looking at signage and stuff. Thank you for that. This is just a little question, but is there a limit? Do you know if there's a limit on how long a community safety zone can be?
Do you want to, or sorry, Andrew, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I don't believe there is. But yeah, I don't actually know, to be honest with you.
I just came across one up north near our cottage, but it was over 4 kilometers long.
Mhm.
And that seemed really long. And then it got me thinking, oh, well, I guess we could, could be as long as you need it to be.
They're regulated through the Highway Traffic Act, so there may be a regulation deep inside that that text, but I'm not aware.
Okay, thank you. My other question was just in terms of the predicted formula for the cut-through traffic prediction. You use 10 trips per household. Is that standard for all different, like all municipalities, or, because it seems really high for a rural household to have 10 trips in and out a day?
Yeah, so that is roughly based on sort of a review of the ITE. It's the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual, and they publish data for different land uses in different contexts. 10 is typically an average, sort of between an urban and a rural. We've tried to take the middle ground of a daily trip generation. Now, admittedly, that is based on data collection throughout Canada and the United States, so it may not be entirely representative of local conditions, but it does produce sort of an industry average that we've seen in similar context.
And is that number, can we adopt a different number in Puslinch? Could we say 5? Because that would actually change the outcome of the predicted cut-through traffic or commuter traffic.
Robert, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on.
I do. You can pick any number you like. However, you'll have to substantiate that at some point in time and how you come up with that number. So without doing some sort of analysis, my suggestion is that you just don't pick a number, but you actually get some background information to support what number you would like to produce. But other than that, I would go with something like what Andrew has used, that is documented and is supported.
Thanks. I just was wondering where that, because it does impact the calculation, you know. Okay, thank you. And then I think that's all. I just wanted to make note on page 44, the lists of the roads that need the recommended resurfacing now. 2 of them are actually scheduled for this summer. So that makes that list a little bit smaller. Anyway, thanks very much.
Okay, turn you over to you, Councilor.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe a couple quick comments before a few questions that I have. I just thought this was a really robust document overall. I learned a lot in reading it, so I appreciate the time and effort that goes into doing these. It was very thoughtful, and I think from my perspective as a new counselor, it helped educate me on the thoughtful process you go into maintaining the roads as assets within the community. So just a thank you to everybody involved. I thought it was quite well done. Just to my questions, I guess the first one is for township staff, just in terms of the public consultation process. Can you share with me where the majority of the comments were received through? I'm assuming a good portion came through the Engage Puslinch aspect of the public consultation. But I'm curious, you can just share how the information was received and any lessons learned that we can maybe glean for other consultation processes, because just my observation here was there was a lot of comments received and a lot of really thoughtful comments. So is there any opportunity for us to learn through what I thought was a pretty robust process for future consultations?
Certainly, to you, Mr. Chair. The township have been collecting comments as far back as 2018, as noted in the report. So a lot of those comments came through our general inbox, just related to service requests or inquiries around the road network. So that was a great process that we were able to compile those in advance, knowing that we would be working on this project as part of the corporate work plan for last year and this year. And then it also helped with the Engage Plus Lynch and getting the word out for that because we had some information already collected from some folks that were looking for when that Engage Plus Lynch and the open comment period would come forward. So compiling that list of kind of interested parties was helpful, as well as our social media. We were able to push that out through our various channels and have it on Engage Plus Lynch platform. So I think all of that worked together to get a very meaningful comment period.
So just one follow-up on that. If I was to say like out of 100%, how much came through just the general email inbox of concerned residents versus concerted efforts to ask for feedback specific to the road management plan, just ballpark?
I would say, looking at that, and it's not a percentage as you've asked, but anything between 2018 and 2022, like we would have, and up until we opened up the public engagement in May of this year, I believe, that all came just kind of organically through our inbox. Everything through the Engage Plus Lynch was targeted through our social media.
Like 10% through 5%? I'm just curious. And I'm trying to understand like what the right avenue or what the opportunities are to make sure that we get good public feedback in the future. And what can we learn from this? So I won't push it. I think that's just something I'd maybe encourage staff to have a conversation thereafter, just to say what worked or what can we learn from this opportunity. The next question was around the cost estimates, and I think Councillor Bailey nailed that from my perspective. I think I had questions around the accuracy of time stamping cost estimates, given the nature of inflationary pressures that we have. So I think, it's good to have a baseline from a cost estimate, but I think when we transition into budget cycling, those obviously or ultimately need to be updated. So I think that was maybe just an observation. I'm not sure if there are any comments to go along with that other than, yeah, we get that type of thing, but just a thought there. The next two comments I had around safety zones, and I'm glad there was some discussion around enforcement. And one thing I didn't see in there, and my apologies if I missed this and going through it, was the utilization of radars for speed enforcement that triggers an actual ticket. And I guess from my standpoint, doing calming measures, it's great. We can paint lines in the road, we can, do all that type of stuff. But if we really want to invoke action, it usually involves a monetary penalty. Just kind of my observation. I'm curious if you can share with us, Robert or Andrew, any thoughts around what that may look like in the future? I know that there's new provincial regions that are starting to enforce stop sign or red light cameras and speeding cameras and all that type of stuff. And can you maybe just speak to what that may look like for our community in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, we've seen an uptake in automated speed enforcement. And similar sort of automatic traffic violation detection. It is very much so community by community sort of dependent. One of the limitations with ASC right now is it's only appropriate, or it can only be used in community safety zones or school zones. So there's sort of a limit on how it can apply. But that broadly fits in the enforcement category for the non-physical traffic calming measures.
And I'm curious, have you seen any downside of implementing those type of procedures? And I guess I look at, we have a community safety zone right through Aberfoyle. Not that I'm advocating for this at this point, but I'm curious what that may look like moving forward as part of a road management plan. And if you've seen these in any other communities that you've worked with, both to the positive or the negative side of things.
I mean, one of the negatives is sort of graffiti is the wrong word I'm looking for, vandalism of the devices and sort of securing them so that they aren't vandalized. Sometimes there is some community pushback on them, but some of the advantages are that they're non-discriminatory on who gets a ticket. And from a police service perspective, there's less interaction with drivers and motorists. So there's sort of advantages and disadvantages to the tool.
Okay, thanks. I think it's just something I'd be interested in learning more about what that may look like in our municipality. I guess the last piece is just the truck route strategy within the larger piece. You know, given the significant changes that we're going to see with the interchanges and the impact of the handling and everything that goes along with that. My only inclination was my vision of a truck route strategy may, you know, this needs to be evolved probably in the next year to 18 months type of thing. So I think I didn't have any specific comments or questions for it right now, but I think as this is a living document, that would be one in my mind that we probably need to reevaluate moving forward. Once we've seen some significant changes in terms of all the interchanges and transitions within the municipality. And I'm a big fan of including signs. I live in Concession 4 and I see trucks flying up that road all the time, and it's a non-truck route. And I think the only other thing I would look for there is, you know, what's compliance and enforcement look like? And we can have a lot of signs and that's great, but if it doesn't deter any operations, then I think, you know, I would say of the feedback I've had from a lot of residents, that's a significant concern what that looks like moving forward. But you know, I don't disagree with it now, but I think it'll probably change for us in the next year to year and a half. So I would encourage, you know, staff to update this as applicable. I think those are all the top level questions I had.
Thank you, Councilors. Councilor Gordon.
Yes, thank you. I guess I wanted to start by saying, and also to echo Councillor Hurst's comments that just want to say it doesn't go unnoticed how much work and time has gone into this project. I know that the scope has kind of evolved over time, and there's an enormous amount of information. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone involved, the consultants, staff, council, everyone. I think it's shaping up to be what will be a very important document for our township. I do have some questions. Some are high level, some are a bit more specific, some are just comments, but I had asked a question prior to council and there was a bit of an answer in the memo provided regarding the anticipated increase in cost to achieve the recommended thickness of granular on gravel roads, the 57 millimeters of gravel. And I know it's kind of difficult to sort of give an exact number of what that cost might end up being, but I think it's safe to say that it will be a substantial increase from what we're currently budgeting. What I am hoping is that maybe you can help me understand that added thickness of gravel. What does that translate to in terms of on the road? Is it just an improved driving surface? Is it the longevity of it? What is the value for that extra cost that we would be seeing?
Matt, do you want to address this portion? I can follow up with some commentary, but maybe you can introduce it since you've been deeply involved in this area.
Yep. Thank you for the question. I would say the benefits that come from that at applying kind of the recommended thickness, there would be the initial benefit of if you think of granular as it's really made up of a bunch of different sized parts. And when you apply it at a thickness that's too thin, you don't get the benefit of all of those parts working together in a cohesive material. What often happens is you get an effect called pebbling when it's applied too thin, and you get a lot of cast off of stone. And that, you know, as the road gets graded or as traffic is using the road, there are stones that fly off and end up in the ditch or on people's front lawns. The other benefit would be that as the road is used season over season and is regraded. Generally, as part of the regrading process, some of that material is moved and then subsequently lost. So you end up kind of raising the road up with your initial application and then having it slowly sink back down. So it's just to maintain a better road profile until the next application.
And just to follow up on that, I know you're concerned about the costs. And one of the things that we did supply was a project sheet, which can apply to all your roads, which you can provide a little bit more detail on the costing, on how you come up with the costing for specific sections of road. So that's another tool that can be used instead of benchmark costs, which include, just average costs of many items. You can get a little bit more specific, and that can be implemented quite easily. If you know certain areas that you treat in a certain way and have certain costs associated, which may not reflect benchmark costs, that can be incorporated into your budget as well. And it should be incorporated into your budget.
Okay, thanks. In terms of conversion of gravel roads to hard surface, there's a proposed criteria for the desktop evaluation. And as the report indicates, none of the road sections in our municipality meet all of that criteria. And I was just wondering, in your experience, is there one criteria that would be sort of like priority over the others or weighted more heavily when you're considering, like when we're looking at converting gravel roads to hard surface, but none of our roads are meeting the criteria? Should we be putting more weight on one of the criteria as we sort of prioritize which ones we would do first?
Matt, you want to take a shot at that?
Yes, I can. Certainly the township can choose to weight criteria, as they apply to their priorities and their level of service. In that sense, some suggestions that we could maybe offer would relate, I guess, firstly, if there are safety concerns associated with the gravel road, or there are consistent issues of usability with the road requiring an above normal expenditure of township resources to maintain those roads. Those would be, I guess, two that we would suggest maybe could take a larger priority than the others. But it really would be at the township's discretion to determine whether some of these criteria even aren't important to the township. Like maybe it's not important to the township that the AADT be evaluated. It would be the level of service the township's looking to provide.
So one of the things that my experience has been is safety has always been the top priority of any project moving forward. And other concerns would be operational concerns, which would be a lower priority. One would be, the cost benefit over the long term. Those are some of the criteria that I would normally use for determining the appropriate treatment.
I guess the next thing we have is more of a comment or a thought. It's in regards to section 4.9, and this is in regards to requests for conversion to hard surface from property owners. And this is where it talks about the idea of the property owners ultimately paying a special levy for the road if they want to have it paved and have the support of the majority of people on the road. I think I worry about the implication of this in terms of just creating conflict and divide amongst neighbors. And I can fully appreciate what's trying to be achieved by this section. And I think maybe it's something that we could introduce down the road so that this work doesn't have to get thrown out. But for me, anyway, personally, I think that maybe this is a section that we could consider putting on pause for now and look at it in the future if there's a need. There's a lot of priorities in this plan, and maybe this is one that we could put pause on, but that's one that just jumped out at me as being like, oh, I don't know all about this one. I think that it could cause a lot of grief and a lot of upset views. That's just a thought. And the next thing was, I had asked a question about why speed humps are not recommended in this if the speed limit is higher than 50 kilometers an hour. And thank you for providing the answer to that. And I totally understand the vertical deflection and the risk of losing control. That all makes sense. I am concerned, however, with the condition of considering traffic calming measures being restricted to only to roads that have a speed limit of 50 kilometers or less. I get it for speed humps, but there's some other sort of mitigation tools in the toolbox in this report, like pavement marking or road narrowing, for example, that I feel could be used. I worry that by implementing the criteria that in order to implement traffic calming measures, the speed limit has to be 50 kilometers or less, that we will be very limited in responding to resident concerns. And even something like, you know, putting an electronic speed display on a rural road, are we even following our own policy if we're doing that, if the speed limit is above 50? So I don't know if that's the intent or if there's some opportunity to add some flexibility there. I don't know if maybe you can share your thoughts.
Yeah, maybe pass that on to Andrew for some comment.
If I could-
Yeah, so
Oh, sorry.
If I could just jump in, the first part of your comment, Counselor, about section 4.9, just to provide some background. That was added based on discussions with township staff about residents requesting upgrades to the road and offering to contribute financially for a portion thereof. Section 4.9 relates to legislature that is already in place within the province for this type of action. So it's not a new process that has been created specifically for this report. It is a process that is currently in place and currently legislated and is a tool that is available. The intent of the section 4.9 was just to highlight that this does exist and maybe provide a bit of a summary on how it could be used. It is analogous, from what I understand, to the Drainage Act and drainage improvements in rural areas and how the costs are borne based on a benefit for the improvement. And we are aware of some municipalities that have a similar process for hard surface and gravel roads that reference this legislation. But we are unaware of how widespread it's been used. And I believe Robert mentioned there's a similar process currently in the region of Waterloo related to noise walls that utilizes this legislation as well. And I can't speak to how widely used it is there either, but just to provide some context on that section.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Yeah, just regarding the region of Waterloo, thanks for mentioning that, Matt. We have used that part of the legislation for a number of years since I think it goes back to, I'm going to say 1999 that we've been using that portion. And what it has done is it actually has reduced the number of requests that would be denied under the regular process, but these requests would keep coming in repeatedly. And this gave them an avenue to move forward. and address the requests in a different way than just denying the request, because it wouldn't fit into the current policy. And usually these things are quite expensive in nature, and a lot of times municipalities don't want to incur additional costs that they would be outside their current responsibilities.
Okay, thanks. And what about the speed mitigation on roads that are greater than 50 kilometers an hour?
Yeah, so we tried to provide some flexibility in section 8.1.4. That rural traffic calming measures can be considered in conjunction with a speed limit review. So Appendix L has a subset of traffic calming measures that are appropriate on rural roads. And then we've tried to afford some flexibility by including that statement.
At the end of the report, one of the recommendations is to consider conducting a comprehensive speed limit review. And I'm just wondering if you could kind of tell us what that would look like and what we would expect to get out of a review like that.
Yeah, so the intent of that is to sort of set a baseline of speed limits in the township based on a common process methodology through the TAC Canadian guidelines for establishing posted speed limits. So this takes into horizontal alignment, vertical alignment, road surface, pedestrian and cyclist exposure, the number of driveways, intersections of different configurations, traffic signals, stop signs, roundabouts. It takes all of these criteria into consideration and then produces a recommended speed limit. And so that was sort of the intent, is to, if you went through that process, you would have a baseline of what the recommended speed limits would be for each road. And then from there, you know, if requests came in for changes, they would start from that baseline review.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess my last question is more likely for staff. And I think this goes along similar to what Councillor Bailey and what Councillor Hurst had sort of already indicated. So this report is providing us with a lot of great recommendations from like a best practice and a technical perspective, and I think that information is crucial and essential. However, as we go through it, it's clear that there's going to be some significant increases in costs to our budget. And we haven't really fully quantified that, and it hasn't been integrated into our asset management plan yet. And so I just want to make sure, I know we're not adopting this plan today, but it is coming soon. And in doing so, are we then putting sort of into policy that we shall do all of these things in this plan? Or is the intent for this to be like a benchmark that we can gradually work towards based on our financial situation? I guess what I'm concerned about is these are all great things and we want to do all these things, but if we adopt this plan, are we then putting our stamp on it and saying, we're going to do all this without really fully knowing what is this going to cost us? So I know that's kind of like very broad of a question, but I just want to sort of understand what we're sort of getting ourselves into. Sorry.
It's okay. And if other staff or GeoBlue Plan wants to assist as well. So from a staff perspective, looking at this policy document and how it would guide us, this is there similar to the section 4.9 that's within the document. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that's we are going to draft the bylaw and that policy and procedure right away. It's there for us as a guiding document. I think staff would want to, if and when this is adopted, take a look at the recommendations coming out of it. We would work through it through our budget process, our corporate work plan process, to see what makes sense to implement at what time. So I don't think it necessarily starts and means that we have to implement all of this, but it certainly is a guiding tool that we can use when these sorts of requests come in, as we're working through asset management and planning for major projects and looking forward for all of those things. I hope that helps.
That is exactly what I was looking for. Thank you, Courtney.
Okay, great, thank you. I echo the sentiments expressed by council with respect to this document. It's a long time coming, but it's worth the effort to wait. Very thorough. I like the fact that you got everyone itemized, you got traffic counts. You've got a lot of information there, and you can quickly look at a glance which ones are 60, which ones are 80, which ones are gravel roads and urban and rural. So I got a series of questions. I'll work backwards. I'll start with Councilor Porter's comments. This document, I agree, it's a benchmark, it's something to work toward. I don't think we have the budget money to spend $2.7 million annually, but certainly we can try to aspire to. The question that Councilor Gordon asked with respect to the TAC, this is the 30K study doing all the roads analysis type of thing. Is that basically the tax spreadsheet that's available now? In other words, you plug in a bunch of information and it spits out the recommended speed. Is that what you're talking about?
That's correct.
Right. So I know we've done several of these in the past, like for example, concession 4 in the area of the dump road. It was came up at the 70 type of thing, and I know the residents are pushing to have that down to 60. Payment for gravel roads, cost sharing with residents. In your experience, where this has been taken up by residents, is it a lump sum payment the residents have? Was it like amortized on the tax bill over a number of years? And if so, what sort of number of years we're looking at?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Just from my experience, the way it works is the municipality would finance the project, and whatever the total cost would be, that would be the responsibility of the residents to pay for. How that would be paid, there would be two opportunities. One is the share that the resident is responsible for, could pay that right up front, or that would be financed over the next 10 years, including any finance charges associated with that, similar to if you were taking out a loan to a bank, but it would be the municipality financing it over that 10-year period, and the cost would be assumed by the affected resident.
Do you have an example of the road that's been done and how much it will have costed a typical resident?
So I don't for roads, but I do for noise walls, and noise walls, believe it or not, they're running about $1.2 million per kilometer, and the costs, I would say it'd be depending on the size of the property and how much of that property backlots onto the roadway, and relative to the rest of the properties as well, how many properties you're dealing with. So it's a percentage of the total number of properties that are backlotting onto the road. So the costs could vary dramatically depending on the size of your property, how much is backlotting onto the road. But it could be anywhere between, for noise walls, could be, sorry. Go ahead.
Just Robert, so I'm okay with that. It's basically trying to doing a linear extrapolation of the frontage. Okay, so I'm going to propose these two questions. And it's more so for the residents who maybe watching in the audience. So first question is, let's assume we have received a complaint about excessive roads and traffic infiltration on a road that has a permitted speed of 80 km. The resident has asked for a speed reduction to 60 kilometers per hour and or traffic speed reduction measures. Using the current document that you have, what would be the process to evaluate the complaint and what would be the range of possible solutions?
Yeah, so township staff would receive a request. And it would go through an initial screening specific to a speed limit modification. It would just be whether a request has been received or whether a speed limit change has been implemented in the previous 3 years. And if that's not the case, then it would go through the TAC speed limit warrant to determine if a speed limit modification was warranted. If so, that would go to council for approval. If it was not warranted, township staff could make the decision to send the request through a different process, such as the traffic calming policy or the truck route policy. If it were to go through the traffic calming policy, the site would be eligible for non-physical measures, such as education and enforcement. But the township could also consider rural measures in conjunction with the speed limit review process.
And can you just summarize the measures that they're suggesting would be appropriate for rural roads?
Bear with me. They are outlined in Appendix L. And so those would include education and enforcement, the speed limit display signs. They can also consider, gateway measures that sort of signify more specifically this is a speed of an area of lower speed, and then primarily pavement marking measures that sort of promote that reduced speed in the area of study. Now that would be more applicable if there was a speed reduction, if that were determined from the warrant. If a speed limit reduction was not warranted, then it would be primarily education and enforcement of the current speed limit.
And the last question for the benefit of the public. Let's assume that there is a road at 60 km and against all learned recommendations, there were speed bumps installed on that road. And an accident occurred because a speeding vehicle hit the speed bump, went off the road and had an accident. How would the liability be assigned? In other words, who would be more at fault, the city, the township, the driver, both type of thing? I'm trying to get a feeling of what to expect.
Yeah, by the words of the policy, we would not recommend speed humps on roads with posted speed limits more than 50 kilometers an hour. And that's consistent with industry standard guidelines. I don't think I can specifically comment on the liability portion, just that it would be inconsistent with what's in the policy in terms of application of speed humps.
Okay. All right, so that's all the questions I have. I'll go around the table once more. Are there any follow-up questions, Councilor Bailey?
So.
Okay, Councilor Blair. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. So go ahead.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of clarifying any revisions that are requested or any further information that is requested for GM Blue Plan to take back to bring back to our next September 6th meeting. What I've captured is adding clarification regarding the purpose of the township's roads and focusing on what Director of Public Works had indicated, that our road system is primarily for commuter traffic based on our proximity to the 401, and just making note of how the road system is not designed for other modes of transportation, such as walking and cycling, given the rural platform and the narrow shoulders. So I've captured that comment to be incorporated into the next draft. I also captured two others, consider removing section 4.9, requests for conversions to hard surface. So we may need some more specific direction on that, as well as just the concern around speed mitigation on roads that are greater than 50 kilometers an hour. And I'm not sure if that comment was resolved with the flexibility that GM Blueplan pointed out within one of the appendix.
Okay, there was a comment made by Councilor Gorda that this document is a benchmark, which was basically reiterated by you. I think that should be a paragraph that should be up front and center, as well as the comment made by Councilor Bailey with respect to the function of the roads.
So I think we've had that sort of, it's almost the intention statement or a preamble at the beginning of a document about what the intention of the document is. So we could work on something like that as long as GM plan is clear on that direction, and what the council is looking for.
So I'd like to go to page 285 of the agenda package. There's a series of recommendation conclusions. So I'll just go through each of the bullets, and I know Councilor first mentioned the truck traffic, and you just mentioned a few seconds ago the gravel road. So perhaps we can amend these recommendations to suit our intent. So the first one is recommended the annual roads capital funding for road rehabilitation be approximately $2.7 million based on road condition assessment, making a total year capital need of $2.7 million. I think we want that tempered a bit, subject to perhaps budget considerations.
Well, I just had a question if, does that number, like I had noted, one of the lists included 2 roads that are actually having the work done this year. So if you were to take, for example, those 2 out, it may change some of the funding predictions. So I'm just wondering, does this number represent projects that have already been budgeted for?
I think what they've done is taken the 10-year number, which basically was 27 million, and divided by 10 and saying it's 2.7.
Okay.
So basically what they've done is an average. So in other words, it's up and down, but on average, it's that. So my comment is, which is subject to budget consideration.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, the recommended the Township Municipal Development Standards of Guidance within the inventory manual be used for the planning, design, construction, capital improvements and existing road network to extent possible and feasible. Any concern for that? Okay, the third bullet to do with cross sections. Any concerns with that? That's a highly technical item. Okay, next one is current approach to maintain existing asphalt road network. As recommended, geotechnical investigations are completed, such as for resurfacing, road thickness for road segments not realizing a minimum of 15 years. I think that's straightforward in the comments.
Yeah, that's good.
Next one, where a single left of asphalt is to be applied, whether for gravel road or where budget does not permit a 2-lift road. In the absence, it is recommended that accommodate 60 mils rather than 50 mils. Any comments on that? No. Okay. Next one is the to do with AADT. Any comments on that? Is it technical comment? All right, technical recommendation. Okay, next one is the truck traffic. Any comments on that? The next one is, this is Council Goyder, is comment on that, recommend to consider closest for proper roads request a hard surface for an existing gravel road for further development adoption, formal practice of desire. A petition form should be developed by property owners when making such request. Any comments on that? Or consider, perhaps you want to say for consideration in the future, is something our nation when we're ready.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends how the rest of the council feels. I I mean, I guess. If I remember correctly, written in there, it's still at the end of the day would be council's decision. I just, it makes me nervous because let's just say we had 10 people living on a road and 6 of the 10 wanted to convert the road to gravel, and it's gonna cost $1 million of transfers to $100,000 per resident. What happens if those 4 residents who are opposed don't have $100,000? They have to move? Like, I'm uncomfortable with the whole thing. So that's why I sort of suggested putting it on pause. And I still feel that way now, but at the end of the day, it would be council's decision. So I guess those sort of.
Let's go around through the comments.
Yeah, I kind of share the concern as well. I can't quite figure out logistics. What if partway through the 10-year, one of them moves? I guess it just goes on to the new person, you know, that's come in. But we have a similar kind of thing at the cottage where, you know, they want everyone to pitch in for road maintenance and not everyone wants to. And it gets a little dicey, you know, with relationships and stuff, because then some people are paying and other people aren't, yet they're still benefiting from the improvement of the road. And that doesn't sit well with neighbors. So I kind of like the idea of maybe just shelving it for a little bit, keeping it as an option maybe for later, but I'm also a little uncomfortable with that too.
Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, I'd be supportive of omitting it. I completely understand the guidance is that it's an option out there. I think philosophically, from my perspective, I think if it's a public road, the township needs to foot the bill of making any improvements. That's just where I am philosophically on that one. So I'd be supportive of removing it, given the current sentiment.
And so we have 2 options to consider: put it on pause or removing it completely. Councilor Green.
Well, I don't think it hurts to pause it and just have the conversation again later.
I think that's a fair outcome.
Okay, so we put a statement to that effect, to pauses. And I'd also like to suggest we also pause the criteria for subsequent gravel roads. In other words, there's 5 roads, I believe, that are priority. The rest of them, the report suggests we go through a process of selecting them. I think Councilor Good, I hit her nail on the head when she said there might be some criteria that we think is a higher priority than the other, and with way more type of thing. So I would suggest we also pause that section. Any comments?
I'm just wondering if, in your experience, if there are some weighted criteria that you've seen other municipalities use.
We've used weighted criteria for prioritizing roads that need to be rehabilitated. Not necessarily for conversions from gravel to pavement. I think at the end of the day, you know, council's just going to have to decide on one process and decide that, you know, there's an agreement that either this does meet the requirement or it doesn't meet the requirement, to avoid, you know, setting precedents in certain areas and then having residents saying, well, you've done it in one area, now you need to do it in this area. And without going with some sort of guideline, I think that puts council in a little bit of a predicament. So at the end of the day, there's not going to be one perfect process, but there is going to be a process that you can rely on and use that as helping to make your decisions.
Well, I was just going to follow up. I think when we had our last recommendation from staff, it was based on, you know, good recommendations and why, this road was wide enough and the base was good and therefore we recommend. So I feel like staff could also help us with that.
Sure. So you agree with Paul's in that section? In other words,
The gravel.
the gravel to paving, they had a list of criteria there, but we'll keep the 5 priority roles
Yeah.
and then pause the evaluation criteria.
Yeah.
Councilor Hurst? Mr. Gordon?
I'm supportive of that.
Councilor Hurst?
Yeah, sorry, I just wanna just clarify that, so in the report, there's 6 roads that they're saying.
Yes.
Meet,
Sure, yeah.
have the fewest, like, are closest to meeting the criteria, so you're suggesting we leave those 6?
Yeah.
But remove the list, or,
No, keep the rest of the gravel roads in play, but not apply the criteria that they had to sort out
Okay,
what's involved type of thing, because as you mentioned, there might be a higher criteria that we may establish, and Council Levy indicated that staff may have a better feel of criteria to use that would help us in making a decision on the next section,
Yeah.
series of roads.
I think a pause the program, I guess the only, I'm trying to think, like, this document will probably be used. Not just for this year or next year, but for many years
Sure.
to come. So those criteria at some point likely will be a consideration.
Well, I think what Council Bailey's suggesting is that staff will come up with criteria as well, and possibly sometime in the future, we'll have a report coming forward that says this and this,
Okay,
and
okay.
combining the two.
I-
That's the way I envision it.
okay, yeah, I would agree.
That's good.
And I saw, Director of Public Works had their hand up as well. He may have the same thinking that I have, and if he wants to contribute. The criteria, so when staff receive requests, which we do often, for conversion from gravel to asphalt, it's extremely helpful to have criteria laid out in a document that we can point to. It helps, explain to the residents why their road may not be on the list. So for consistency for both staff and the public to understand the rationales, I would strongly suggest the criteria stay in. If we get to the point where the roads that are listed in the plan, I believe there's 6, we are nearing completion of those roads. That may trigger us to take another look at this document to establish new criteria at that time to apply to roads that we want to now tackle coming up. I just worry without the criteria listed in a document, it leaves staff and the public in a position where they may, there may be confusion or upset if they've made a request and staff can't point to that specific criteria.
Perhaps we can put a sort of a catch-all paragraph ahead of that saying the consideration of these other roles will be done after these are done and the criteria may be subsequently changed.
I think that's an excellent idea because that also gives staff and GM Blue Plan a time to collect the requests, analyze the requests, and help us to develop what that criteria could look like at that time.
Just maybe a suggestion here is I like the concept of, I think we've identified phase 1. And maybe phase 2 is to be determined based on criteria, but I think it's an important signal to say, look, this process is going to continue, but here are the top 6 roads that are phase 1 and phase 2 being subsequent. Just to your comments, Courtney, I think that's the right signal to send forward in my opinion.
And so the idea is to keep the criteria in there so she has a benchmark by which she can address comments made by.
And then it could be prioritized thereafter, after
Sure.
phase 1 is completed, then there's potential to reprioritize phase 2 if that criteria changes in any way based on safety, condition of the road, so on and so forth.
Okay, fair enough. So what do you have revised wording for that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I've just included that some wording be added to the gravel to asphalt conversion criteria that identifies the criteria in the list of roads as a phase 1, and that the plan will be reevaluated once those roads are and a new criteria may be established by council.
I just have a question, and I don't know how you quantify it, but if we know of a road that is currently gravel, and by paving it, we can anticipate speeding issues, cut through issues, like just knowing that it would actually not be beneficial to pave it. How do we either remove it from the list or have a criteria that maybe we need to build that into the criteria? If paved would cause, you know, more safety unintended consequences or safety issues, therefore, you know.
Well, perhaps we can discuss that as each vote comes up type of thing. And,
Okay.
like one of them is in Councillor Gordon's area and maybe a concern and cut through there. That's
But I think maybe at the time of the road, when the project arises, then that at the same time, we would also be looking at speed limits and possible traffic calming mitigation at the same time. So, I don't know, I think it's almost like a case by case basis that should happen.
good. Very nice. Okay, next one is a ditching program, annual budget of 50,000 and revised after 1 and 2 years of ditching. Again, I'd like to suggest we say subject to funding, subject to budget considerations. Comments?
I was just gonna say, I think it's a great program if it will help extend the life of the road. I think it's a good investment if that's, you know, if that's gonna be helpful to extending it. And I don't know if that's the case, maybe Mr. Fowler can comment on that.
Mr. Fowler, any comments?
Yes, I completely agree. Usually every year when we establish our roads to be rehabilitated, a ditching review is done along with culvert replacements. Sometimes it ends up benefiting the township, and other times, as far as from a budget standpoint, it ends up costing the township a heck of a lot more. Depending upon the severity of the ditching and the slopes that are then created, then there's the possibility of guide rail now being required that preliminarily wasn't there. So there's a cost of a couple $100,000, maybe possibly more, to a road project if we start enhancing our ditching program. But again, the number one priority is to move water off the road and into the ditch, and then to flow appropriately. So it's kind of the cost of doing business. And yeah, any type of initiative to begin a proper ditching program certainly would not hurt the township.
Okay, so consensus, leave it as is?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, next one, annual gravel roads budget be increased at a minimum thickness of 60 mils, and then any comments on that? This is your comments, Councilor.
Yeah, I
Gordon.
think you can, it just is, you know, pending funds available.
Comments? Councilor Gordon suggesting subject to budget availability. Do we want, Mr. Fowler, in your experience doing and increasing the thickness, would that benefit the road greatly?
Absolutely. Yes, it would. Obviously, the more material we can keep on the actual traveled portion of the road, it will last longer as far as proper driving wheel tracks and stability. Once we start to get to the point where we don't have a lot of available material on the roadway, we start to get into areas of subbase that are getting pulled up with large rocks, things like that. Then you end up with increased wheel rutting, potholes, etc. So to have a healthy granular base at all times on our gravel roads is only beneficial to the traveling public.
So, Councilor Gordon is suggesting subject to budget availability. Any comments on that? Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, Mr. Fowler, I just have a question about adding the extra gravel and, the relationship between, like drainage. I know down in, Darkwood Road area, a lot of water sort of sits in pools and some of the corners. Does adding the extra gravel help in those conditions?
Sorry, Councilor Bailey, are you referring to the ditches holding water or the actual road base holding water?
Road base, so by adding up to 60 millimeter, does that help with the water drainage or pooling problems?
Yes, that is correct. Obviously, the more material that's on the actual road surface, the grader operator can then build a proper crown, which aids in drainage off the road. Any high spots on the edges, whether it be from plowing or just traffic throwing stones to the side, would have to be removed also. But again, a proper layer of gravel on the road base makes it easier for everyone, especially the operator, to reshape the road so it's, whether it be a 2, 3, 4% slope to get the water off the road and into the ditches.
Okay, and then I think the report also suggested that by adding the extra thickness, that it could extend maintenance or extend the life of the road a little bit. Is that correct?
From a maintenance viewpoint, yes, I do agree. There still is the possibility of, depending upon the area that we're talking about, the sub-base conditions, whether they be saturated, a new layer of granular on top will not solve that. That's a bigger issue to deal with. But as far as the traveled portion of the road, any additional granular, whether it be A or granular M, is definitely beneficial.
Thank you.
Okay, so any comments or concerns? We say subject to budget availability?
Yeah.
Good. Next one is to do with the checklist. I assume staff are okay with that. Next thing is allocating $10,000 for crack sealing to extend the longevity of the roads. Any comments, questions? No? With that, traffic management policies outlined as be implemented, and I guess that's coached by the general statement we have up front. Comments? No? Questions? It is recommended to consider comprehensive speed limit review for all rules of jurisdiction. Approximate budget will be $30,000. So comments, discussions on this. Councilor Bailey?
Again, subject to budget, but I like the idea of actually, getting a baseline and actually having a study done and being able to respond to the public, when they ask, and make sure the speed limits are the way they should be at. I'm often concerned with, okay, we've approved extra development along a road. So years ago, 80 was okay, but maybe now we need to reassess it. There's more driveways on it, maybe 70, so it would be good to just reassess where we're at.
Okay, I guess from the point of liability, if we do this and it comes in at lower and we don't implement this for a few years, is that a concern?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think that council would want to look at this as a fulsome project that would include the signage portion and budgeting for that. So perhaps what we could do, we could put together some more information. This looks as though, I believe that this $30,000 is just for the speed limit review. So whatever that audit is for, that would inform what our signage potentially would be in terms of budget. But council should likely be prepared to complete that audit and replace the signage from budgeting perspective. So we may want to look at that down the road when budget permits us to complete the project.
You're saying defer this expenditure until such time in the future as we have budget?
So through Mr. Chair, I'm not concerned with the way this recommendation is worded because it asks us to consider it. So again, we could add that wording subject to budget considerations. This doesn't have to be something this year. We could work with our director of finance to see if there's any way that we could help with funding this project I'm not concerned with the way it's worded to consider it. It could stay in and we could add the wording subject to budget consideration.
You raised a point with respect to signage costs, so perhaps we can add something in here, including associated signage costs of X type of thing. Is there an estimate we can put in, say per kilometer of road?
So the Director of Public Works might have more information, but I think without knowing what the audit will tell us in terms of needing to replace signs, if they do need it to be a different speed, it'll be hard to know what those signage costs would be. You could certainly identify the individual sign costs, reflectivity costs, ongoing maintenance sort of thing, and then how frequently they should be posted per kilometer to give us an idea. But again, we wouldn't know until the budget or until the audit, reviewing the speed limit is reviewed. But I would recommend including the wording around budgeting for signage and subject to budget considerations in that as well.
Fair enough. Any comments, concerns? Councilor Burke?
Yeah, I guess I maybe view this as a three-step process. Is one, you do the study, step one. Step two is you implement the feedback or the outcomes of the study, which may potentially be signage. That's phase two. Then the third phase in my mind would be is there's now an established process or benchmark in place for subsequent reviews. So from my perspective, I think this would be something that would be incurred over multiple budget cycles. Phase one or step one would be the 30,000 to actually do the study. Stop. Once you understand what the study is, then you implement the recommendations for the changes. That's step two. That could be in the next budget cycle. And then the third step would be, I think now we have a baseline as a township to be able to say, if we get subsequent requests for speed changes, there's an established process in place. And if, residential changes have taken place or whatever the criteria are. So I kind of view this as my 2 cents would be, I like it the way it is, subject to budget criteria. But we also need to understand that this is the first step in a three-step process for the municipality. And I could maybe recommend that budget for the first phase of this process is $30,000. Other budget implications are to be determined thereafter, type of thing.
Councilor Burke?
Yeah, I agree. I guess I just wonder. It also, this would be to establish speed limits on every single road in the township, and maybe there's lots of roads that don't need that analysis. So I don't know, maybe we should be looking at doing it more on the problem roads. I'm not sure if that's even an option, but just a thought. But I agree with doing it as.
So there are some sections of road that are currently 60. Is the intent to do those roads as well to up the speed limit? My thought process is no. Mr. Fowler?
Thank you. I would advise that we do not do the roads that are currently posted at 60. When the time came that these roads were posted for 60, the TAC procedure was completed on all these sections, and TAC did indicate that 60 was actually too low. The median was 70, and at the time it was just easier to go the 60-kilometer-hour route. My opinion and my talks with OPP at several times is that they also feel that if an unrealistic speed limit is set to appease residents, that it does become unenforceable because the natural instinct for drivers is to drive at what they're comfortable with, and that is largely what TAC revolves around for the conditions.
So perhaps we should coach this by saying, speed review for all roads under jurisdiction that are over 60 km per hour.
Yeah.
Okay. And subject to budget approval. Okay, the last sentence is recommended that township implement the recommendations provided within the public engagement section of the plan for responding to public comments and internal tracking. Comments, Council Bailey?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't know what the comments were, but I don't know if we want to be implementing all those recommendations.
No, there's basically, they are generic type comments that staff will review the request in line with the applicable policies that are in place.
Because I'd have to review them again. I just saw a lot of the comments for the Lake Road. I didn't notice the other comments.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the comment matrix shows some draft responses. Some of them, again, are standard. If it's not our road system, then that would be the response. But as outlined in, I believe it's in the public engagement section of the report. It's on page 84 of the PDF. It starts with public engagement. But it does give a little bit of information about how staff are going to review inquiries or requests as they come in. They will be screened out based on the, whether it's our road or whether the roads management plan requires any sort of action. Any request that does have an action that's recommended by staff would come to council through the budget process. So we have the responses dating back to 2018 and staff are just, this recommendation relates to just staff being able to work through those and provide responses in accordance with the roads management plan once it's approved.
Comments, Council? First.
Okay.
So, the only comment I have is there's been numerous requests that aren't reflected in that list, such as Hume Road. We have numerous deputations. We had concession for in the area of the dump. We recently had multi-road as well. So I'd like to suggest that all those be included in there as well.
To you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly go back. We did do a review of delegations and that sort of thing, but we can do a double check in and just ensure anyone who submitted comments receives a response in accordance with the plan.
Thank you. Okay, and the last items that I just want to touch on is the type of items that councilors asked at the last meeting. So can edge lines be added to narrow roads to help with traffic calming? I guess the answer is yes. Can speed bumps be out of rural roads? The answer is depends on speed, 50 or less. Can solar power panel signs be installed? I guess that's an item that's being considered for us to inclusion in the budget for consideration. Mr. Fan, is that correct?
I can speak to that, John. Yes, the solar panel speed indicators will be included in the 2024 budget for consideration.
Thank you. And then the last comment was that should the speed limit in township be lowered to 60 or less? Any comments or discussions on that item?
We do the assessment. If we do the assessment, that would give us our answer.
Okay, so that's great. So Cyclops just reread everything and
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I just had one point of clarification. When we talk about pausing, section 4.9, does council want to see that removed from this document? I'm not quite sure how to include wording that we're pausing it. If we're going to remove it, but still keep it on file.
I don't think we want to remove it. I think that's a flavor I think we have. This is to do with the gravel road criteria.
This is to do with residents funding conversions from hard road. And so I'm not sure how to incorporate like pausing a provision of it versus removing it and just keeping it on file for consideration at another time.
Perhaps just add as what you're saying as a sentence in that for consideration at a later time.
Can you just, could we make it an appendix as alternative options to consider in the future? Kind of an appendix.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, from what I understand, the way it's included at this time, we don't have a bylaw, we don't have a, like any of the forms generated. So it's included sort of already paused. If we were to receive a request, council would have to direct us to take all these next steps, to actually put it in place. So I think the way I see it, it already is sort of tentatively in here. Council would need to give staff further direction if you actually wanted to utilize it.
Okay, perhaps you can say, suggest that, add that in the report that in order to implement this, council needs to provide the direction.
I think it kind of ought to say that.
Or we could be more explicit.
Yeah. Yeah, just to follow up, I mean, any implementation of this is going to require a bylaw to be passed by council. So nothing would be implemented until that bylaw has been approved.
So I think we want something in there so the residents know that there is a process to get it going.
I can read out what I have in just one moment.
Sure.
So the resolution is, whereas the Township of Pleasant Roads Management Plan be used as a tool, that staff incorporate council's final comments into the third draft to be presented at the September 6th council meeting as follows. Add clarification regarding the purpose of the township roads, given that the township road network is primarily used for commuter traffic based on its proximity to the 401 and neighboring urban centers, i.e. it's not designed for walking or cycling, as the road network consists of rural platform roads with narrow shoulders. And include wording that the current gravel to asphalt conversion criteria are identified as phase 1, and that the criteria will be reevaluated once the priority list of roads have been converted to asphalt. Include a statement in the introduction section clarifying that the roads management plan is a guidance document for the township for the purposes of maintaining and operating the township's road network, budgeting for the township's road network, and responding to concerns and requests regarding the township's road network. Add the wording subject to budget considerations to recommendation number 1. Clarify recommendation number 9 regarding section 4.9 requests for conversions to have hard surface, to state that section 4.9 is not in effect until such time that council passes the associated bylaw. Add the wording subject to budget considerations to recommendation number 10. Similar, add the same subject to budget considerations for recommendation number 11. And add the wording that a speed review for all roads over 60 kilometers an hour and subject to budget consideration, including estimated signage and maintenance cost as a phase approach to recommendation number 15.
Okay, any comments? Good, so we have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Goydo. All in favor? Great, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We move to 9.3.5 report ADM 2023-041, Christmas adding management reports. Select Fox will read the resolution.
That report ADM 2023-041 entitled Township of Pleasant Land Acknowledgement and Procedural Bylaw Amendment be received, and the council endorsed the Township of Pleasant Land Acknowledgement report prepared by ASI. And the council give 3 readings to bylaw number 2023-035, being a bylaw to amend the township procedural bylaw 2022-046.
So now the mover is seconded to bring it into discussion. Moved by Councilor Goydo, second by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? Thank you. Good. Amy and Martin, who's gonna do the short talk?
That would be me. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen to provide a presentation.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, everybody can see my screen? Perfect. So thank you so much for the opportunity to present this important project to you today, the Wellington County Municipalities Land Acknowledgement Project. My name is Annie Veilleux. I'm Senior Cultural Heritage Specialist and Manager of the Cultural Heritage Division at ASI. And with me today is Martin Cooper, Senior Associate and the Indigenous Engagement Lead on this project. So we'll both be available to answer questions if you have any after my short presentation. Canadian societal perceptions of Indigenous histories are changing, and there is an increased appetite to discuss and learn about Indigenous identity within Canada today. In order to move forward with reconciliation as a nation, we need to explore every opportunity to discuss Indigenous culture, past and present, supporting First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples' cultural revitalization, and integrating Indigenous knowledge systems, oral histories, laws, protocols, and connections to the land into the reconciliation process are essential. ASI was retained by the chief administrative officers of 6 of the local municipalities in Wellington County to assist in the development of Indigenous land acknowledgements. A land acknowledgement involves making a statement acknowledging the presence of Indigenous peoples past and present and recognizing Indigenous traditional lands and treaties. The land acknowledgement can also identify the displacement and exclusion of Indigenous peoples from their traditional territories. As part of this project, ASI worked with a working group made up of the municipal CAOs. ASI conducted critical review of land acknowledgements to get an understanding of both the best practices associated with creating and giving land acknowledgements, as well as the criticisms that have been raised regarding this practice. Information was gathered from opinion pieces by Indigenous and non-Indigenous individuals, from existing land acknowledgements, and through ongoing conversations with Indigenous nations. A review of primary and secondary sources was undertaken to get an understanding of the Indigenous history of the area, as well as an understanding of the treaties covering the municipalities within Wellington County. Research was also conducted with the specific intent to try to identify specific examples of exclusion and displacement that could be recognized in the land acknowledgement. Following the critical review and the background and historical research, individual land acknowledgements were drafted for each of the participating municipalities. Final reporting also including drafting an information booklet for use by staff. It should be noted that the report information booklet, as well as the land acknowledgements themselves, should be considered living documents and be reviewed on a regular basis and updated as needed. Input from Indigenous nations was, of course, integral to the success of the Land Acknowledgement Project, and I will speak to the Indigenous Engagement Program in a few slides. Land acknowledgements are a traditional Indigenous practice that have been used since time immemorial. They honor, respect, and recognize the nations that live within a given territory. Land acknowledgements originating from settler colonial institutions and governments, however, are more recent, having been around for almost a decade. They have increased in use following the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. Land acknowledgements have also been the subject of much criticisms from both Indigenous and non-Indigenous commentators. Some critics have pointed out that poorly conceived land acknowledgements can have the opposite effect of what they are intended to do. Instead of contributing towards the goal of truth and reconciliation, they can be seen as just one more example of lip service being paid to centuries of oppression and injustice to Indigenous peoples in Canada. Land acknowledgements are an opportunity for the larger society to state the wrongs of the past and contribute to a feeling of inclusivity, and should not be the source of further alienation. It is important that before the creation of a land acknowledgement, serious thought be given to the wrongs committed to Indigenous peoples in the past and how that has continued to the present. This can be done at a local level through historical research and interviewing Indigenous knowledge keepers to reveal specific examples of exclusion and displacement. This information should be included when it is available. A land acknowledgement should not be the culmination of a municipality's attempt at reconciliation, but a starting point. Once adopted, one should seek opportunities to improve the relationship between non-Indigenous and Indigenous members of the community, as well as ways to reach out and support Indigenous communities. Finally, a land acknowledgement should not be static, but fluid and open to revisions. Indigenous peoples have been living in, traveling through, using the land in this area for thousands of years. It is only relatively recently in the long history of the area that the arrival of colonizers and settlers and alteration of the landscape disrupted the rhythm of life for the Indigenous groups living in the area. Wellington County is covered by several treaties related to the period of land cessions in southern Ontario. These treaties describe the historical nations with whom the Crown negotiated the transfer of land, in some cases the rights that are assured to these nations within the lands. The township of Puslinch is located within the lands covered by the Nanfan Treaty of 1701 and the Between the Lakes Purchase, or Treaty Number 3 of 1792. It is located on the traditional territory of the Hattahawkha, or known in the historical record as the Neutral, and the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee. Input from Indigenous nations was integral to the success of the Land Acknowledgement Project. The following nations were contacted about the project: Amjoaning First Nation, Beausoleil First Nation, Chippewas of Georgina First Nation, Chippewas of Rama First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy Chiefs Council via the Haudenosaunee Development Institute, Kettle and Stony Point First Nation, the Métis Nation of Ontario, Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, and the Six Nations of the Grand River Elected Council. Engagement with rights-bearing Indigenous nations as it relates to the Land Acknowledgement Project began in December 2021 with a circulation of a project notice to the nations. The notice described the decision to undertake the project, its goals and timelines, and provided contact information. A project update was circulated in May 2022 to inform the nations that a draft report and draft land acknowledgements had been produced, and the draft document was circulated for review and comment. The notice also invited recipients to contact the chair of the working group should they want to discuss the project further or request a meeting. Representatives of the Six Nations of the Grand River, the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, and the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation provided written comments on the report. ASI met with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation to discuss technical aspects of the report. Members of the working group and ASI also met with representatives of the Six Nations of the Grand River on 2 separate occasions. ASI worked with the communities to address concerns and feedback and made revisions to relevant sections of the report. The CAOs of the municipalities involved in this project are committed to continued engagement with identified Indigenous nations with rights and interests in the project. An information booklet was drafted, which includes a review of practices for putting together a land acknowledgement, but also key considerations when giving a land acknowledgement. So, for example, a land acknowledgement should be a simple sign of respect. Correct pronunciation of names is really important, so practicing correct pronunciation ahead of time using audio clips if necessary is really useful. It should be given, it should come from a non-Indigenous source and should be given by the chair of a meeting or an official presiding over an event, can be used for significant events, and it has to be given with thought and meaning to the words. We also created a booklet. The booklet also included FAQs, frequently asked questions, and it includes questions that may be asked by municipal staff and partners concerning land acknowledgements. And this section can be expanded as needed as additional questions are asked. Some of the questions we addressed in the report are: what is the purpose of a land acknowledgement? When should one be given? Who should be giving the land acknowledgement? How do I make a land acknowledgement meaningful? Questions on what's the difference between traditional territory and treaty lands, what are treaty rights, what is Turtle Island? Finally, the following is the land acknowledgement that was drafted for the Township of Puslinch, and I'll read it for you today. The lands we know today as the Township of Puslinch have been home to Indigenous people since time immemorial. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Hattahawkha, as well as the treaty lands and traditional territory of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee. With increasing encroachment by non-Indigenous settlers in the Township of Puslinch, the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee could not continue their traditional lifestyle and settled in their villages along the Credit River and in the Grand River Valley. These Indigenous nations uphold their treaty rights within our jurisdiction. Today, the township of Puslinch remains home to Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We are grateful to have the opportunity to share and respect Mother Earth and are committed to building constructive and cooperative relationships with Indigenous nations. Thank you, and that's the end of our presentation.
Council for questions and comments, Council David.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation and for all the work that's gone into that. I had a couple questions today. Just trying to think what order to do them in. I guess the first question I had was, can you speak to the frequency of when a land acknowledgement should be done?
Sure, that's a question that we often receive, and I guess the land acknowledgement should, as I mentioned earlier, should originate with non-Indigenous members of a community, since it's a statement of respect and offer of reconciliation to Indigenous people. There are no set rules guiding when a land acknowledgement should be given, as long as the land acknowledgement is given in a meaningful way and not just recited, by rote, not just as a check mark to get through. It is up to the municipality to determine how often and for which occasion a land acknowledgement should be given.
Okay, and then through what I've been reading as well, my understanding is that the land acknowledgement should sort of not be the same every time it's read out, but based on new learnings, new things, new connections, and then adding on to it. So is that something that, the first time we use this land acknowledgement, we'll use what's been suggested here, but then as, next year or whenever we do it next, we might have built onto it with any more local information. Is that kind of right? And if so, who's kind of building on that piece?
So a land acknowledgement is supposed to be fluid and a living document. So this land acknowledgement can be used for now, and as new information comes up, if you receive any comments from any First Nations, or just new knowledge comes up, or new practices, it could be updated. Martin, I don't know if you'd like to add some comment on how often or a land acknowledgement should be updated.
Well, as you mentioned, Danny, if new information becomes available, if, for instance, a nation, has some interest in rewording, or these things happen. I don't think it's going to happen on a frequent basis, or it should happen soon, but just be open to revise it as necessary. But again, keeping in mind, that it has to be historically accurate and culturally appropriate too. So, if one group comes forward and suggests a change, really, you need to reach out to the others to make sure it's okay with them as well. Because it's possible, and this happens occasionally, where you get one nation saying, we don't think you should be acknowledging another nation who they may have overlapping rights with. So, you have to balance those comments and make a decision. But as far as this land acknowledgement goes, it should be good for a while, because we spent a couple of years vetting it and reaching out to the nations and getting their input and their concurrence with it. So it should be good for a while anyways.
Oh, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Just in the report, and you hear a lot about how land acknowledgements need to be meaningful. And so I'm trying to think how you can make a land acknowledgement more meaningful. What we do at the beginning of our council meetings is we have a moment of reflection. So is something like that appropriate after a land acknowledgement, to then pause and have a moment of reflection, think about what we've just heard? Is that an example of something that makes it more meaningful?
I think that's a great example. And I think just the way it's read. So if somebody just goes up and kind of tries to read it, mispronounces mispronounces words, that's not meaningful. But to take the time to learn about how to pronounce the appropriate names, how to pronounce, you know, reading it through with meaning. Also just taking the time to read through the report and learn about the history, add some meaning to it as well when you're giving it. So all these actions, I think, can be more of a personal manner way for one to put meaning into it.
But definitely reflecting after it's given, I think is a great idea, because it, makes people think every time it's read, so it isn't just read by rote. Yeah, I think that's great.
So my final, more of a comment, I guess, or a question, but the Wellington County Museum, I was just there this summer with my son. But on the third floor, they have a display set up, and it's a whole model about the local Attawandaron settlement that was in the 1500s here in Puslinch. And so I didn't see anything about that in the report, but I'm wondering if that's something we can be bringing forward and adding to make it a local connection.
Yeah, in the report, we do talk about the neutral, who were also known as by the Huron-Wendat as the Hattaway-Wendat. We do mention their presence in Puslinch and talk about it in the report, but we can add a reference to the museum as well. I'm not sure. I know that I think there's the Coleman Village and another site in Puslinch that was excavated that dates around 1400 to 1500 AD. So I'm not sure. Is that referenced in the report, Annie?
I'd have to go back to see if we mentioned that specific site, but I do know we do mention the presence of the Hattaway-Wendat within the historical summary, but adding a specific mention of specific sites could be useful and something we can do.
I find a really local connection, I think, is important. Anyway, thank you very much for your presentation.
Councilor
Thank
Rich.
Yeah, thank you. I think just a degree of appreciation for going through this process on behalf of the township. I think it's also, I think it's important that all of the municipalities within Wellington County went through this process together. And I think that's important, realizing it's different geographical regions, but I think sharing the common knowledge and resources at the township level, I think is important. A couple of quick questions. I'm curious, was there any pushback received? And I get that this is a delicate narrative that one has to go through here, not sounding, to put meaning in type of land acknowledgements and not just, checking a box, if you will, type of thing. So I'm curious, can you maybe just share with us the reception of the various First Nation communities that you reached out to and their receptiveness or willingness or the feedback that you received, realizing that we were looking to do this, if you will?
Sure, Martin, you want to take the first step, and I can add anything if.
Yeah. So without being specific, but in general, with the nations that we met with, overall, and this is true, in all over Ontario and Canada, is that First Nations really don't like land acknowledgements, and we talk about this in the report. And the reason they don't like land acknowledgements is because they believe most of them are just paying lip service to reconciliation and wanting to engage with First Nations. What they want to see more than a statement, is actual action, is reaching out. A municipality, for instance, reaching out and asking for input on, different planning issues, which are part of the provincial policy statement anyways, but they would like to see action more than words. And they think that sometimes land acknowledgements are substitutes for actual action. So that you hear that generally, that comment from most of the groups we met with. But having said that, they were also, quite interested and impressed that a municipality would be going to this extent to do the research and the work on developing a land acknowledgement. A lot of the, sorry, this is a clock I have in my study. So one of the concerns they have is that they're historically accurate. So they were quite impressed that, we went and that Wellington County wanted to do this kind of in-depth research to make sure they were getting it right.
Thank you, Ned. I appreciate the detailed answer that you gave, and I think you're kind of getting at my next question would be is, and I'm not sure, maybe this is a hard thing to answer from a staff standpoint, but do we have any residents that have identified themselves as Indigenous within our community? Forgive me for not knowing, but more along the line of the communication, just to what you were getting at, Mark, to reach out and let them, if they haven't heard we were going through this process, to let them know. Maybe I'm struggling with where we go with this, but I'd like to make sure that at least we make an effort within the community to communicate this and seek guidance or feedback from local residents. I'll stop there.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we do have the opportunity to reach out and engage with the community just through our website, different tools, press release, things like that, as well as incorporating the statement into our committees, I think is something significant as well, particularly our Heritage Advisory Committee. I know the procedural bylaw talks about that committee acknowledging with this land statement more often than there are others. So I do think there's opportunities with the tools we have to engage the community and shine a light on this research and this study.
Yeah, thanks. I think we want to make sure that we put an effort forward to the broader community that we're going through this. And obviously, as chair of the Heritage Committee, I'm very supportive of that. Yeah, no, I think good work. I think this is important. We need to make sure that we do it in a thoughtful manner. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Also good.
Yeah, thank you very much. I thought that this was an outstanding report. It was full of a lot of really good sort of educational history and information. So I really appreciated all the effort that went into the report. Just a couple of short questions. You indicated both in the report and in your presentation the importance of being genuine when making a land acknowledgement statement, and that includes the proper pronunciations. I was wondering if that's something that you might be able to assist with some training on, or have some audio clips that we could use at council, but also to share with our residents to sort of educate on that specific component of things.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and that's something we can definitely do to put together a document that outlines perhaps some of the phonetic pronunciation, but also clips to reputable links that kind of shows how to pronounce the various terms, the various names, and that's definitely something that we can do.
And then just sort of as a follow-up on that, and given that this report has so much sort of history and education built into it, can you suggest any ways of how we can use that information to, as you say, sort of take action and provide that information to our local residents and businesses? How can we make that, share that information in a readily available way to our residents? Do you have any ideas?
I mean, other than just sharing the report, but I don't think, some people would read the whole report, but sometimes having being faced with a 60-page report, going through all the information is out of reach for some people. There's always perhaps your heritage committee would have some ideas, but some ideas would be you could change this into more of a public facing document that's more approachable and digestible for the general public, that highlights some of this history, some aspects we've done. We can also, there's also some workshops that we can put together to help provide this information either to staff or the local community. Invite everybody to sit down and we can, have a chat and discuss our findings and the history of the area. I think, yeah, Martin, I don't know if you have any other suggestions on ideas to
Yeah, I mean,
bring this forward to the public.
we could do a public presentation at the museum or at a public library and invite the public to attend and talk about, how the land acknowledgement was developed and, some of the history behind it, if you're interested.
I apologize. I know I kind of put you on the spot there. But
That's okay.
No, I think that's a
great idea.
it's a good point, and it's a great idea, so that, because you want to let people know not only that there is a land acknowledgement, but what the basis is. And if you just post the report, not everybody's going to read it. So
but it's good to know that you're open to assisting in that education component as well.
Of course.
So I don't have any questions per se. It's a very good document. It's a nice historical document. So I've got some suggestions. I'd like to suggest that we refer the report to the Heritage Committee to see how they feel would be appropriate way to engage the public in awareness of this particular land acknowledgement. Also, I like to suggest we put it on our website. And also like to suggest that we give it to the historical committee, the document in the library. In other words, I think this is one of the documents that should be in there, that sort of does the heritage of our lands in Fuslench. There were comments made about adding villages to the report. Council Bailey made comments, and you mentioned one as well that wasn't mentioned. So I was wondering if we can get that updated. And see what else I had. And the pronunciation document. I think that's a very good idea. We certainly want to be very cognizant and respectful of the nations involved by having the availability of how to say names properly. To you, Councilor Bailey, the procedure bylaw does say when this will be read out. It says the inaugural meeting of each term, and each committee and local board will read it, and the Heritage Committee will read it every meeting.
Yeah.
So those are the comments I've made, and I'd like to suggest staff read them out, and we have a mover and a seconder and vote on it. Go ahead.
I just have something else to add. In terms of the model and the display that's at the county museum, I did speak to County Councillor Matthew Balmer, and he was going to reach out and see. We were discussing the potential of bringing that whole display actually to Fuslench, maybe in the library. And so I'm seeing this coming together, how you could have the display on, you could have a workshop happening for the public, you could have the students from Aberfoyle School coming over, anyway, and just getting a lot of engagement and having a visual display and then having the land acknowledgement coming together. So Councilor Belmer said he would get back to me, but it's kind of in the works to see if we can bring the display to Fuslench.
Certainly, put it in Council Hearst bailiwick, and that's another item that can be considered as part of the methods and means of engaging by the public. Okay, Ms. Whitefox.
All right, through you, Mr. Chair, I believe I've captured it all. That report, ADM 2023-041 entitled Township of Portsmouth Land Acknowledgement and Procedural Bylaw Amendment be received. The council endorsed the Township of Portsmouth Land Acknowledgement report prepared by ASI. And that council direct staff to forward the report and supporting documents to the Heritage Committee for information and to develop potential public engagement opportunities and report back to council. That council direct staff to forward the report and supporting documents to the Historical Society for information and for distribution to the public at the library. And that council requests that the local references noted by council be included in the report. And the council direct staff to develop a webpage dedicated to the Township Land Acknowledgement Report and supporting information. And the council give 3 readings to bylaw number 2023-035, being a bylaw to amend the Township Procedural Bylaw 2022-046.
Okay, any suggestions on amendments? We're good. Okay, I have a mover and a second. Move from Council First, second to Council Bailey. All in favor? Good, thank you very much. And
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
The consent agenda item 6.2 is for the August 16th meeting. And the council has staff to forward the letter to the County Economic Development Department and engage in discussions on how businesses can be utilized during the construction project that we have.
We have a technical issue. We're back in business, so we'll just do a quick roll call. Councilor Bailey,
Present.
Councilor Hurst,
Present.
Councilor Goyda,
Present.
and I, Councilor Zelfs, present as well. So we were on the consent items. Councilor Hurst had the floor with respect to 6.8 on a Caledon illegal land use enforcement update.
Yeah, I just recommend that staff review the town of Caledon's illegal land use enforcement recommendation. I think it has a lot of applicability to our municipality, just in terms of ensuring that appropriate land uses are adhered to and any illegal uses are enforced to the full extent of the law. And that upon review that if staff feel fit, that we support the town of Caledon's endeavors and communicate that with the Premier and Minister Clark.
Do you have a motion prepared?
The consent agenda item 6.8 listed for the August 16th council meeting be received. And whereas the Township Council supports a resolution from the town of Caledon regarding illegal land use and enforcement, the council directs staff to send a support resolution accordingly.
Okay, are you okay with that, Council? Good. Mover and a seconder, moved by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Bailey. All in favor? Thank you. So the next one I have for you is municipal code of conduct 6.19.
Yeah, and it came from the municipality of Great Highlands, and I think they discussed the municipal code of conduct, and I think I found it quite thorough, and I guess it was a recommendation to staff to further investigate the applicability for our municipality in terms of supporting the request of the Association of Municipalities of Ontario to introduce legislation to strengthen municipal code of conduct.
Soybox, the resolution coming. Oh, sorry.
I just had a question. Have we seen this before? Is this in support of another municipality's Correspondence?
Yeah, we've done, I think, supports before, but I don't think we went to AMO.
Okay.
Okay, and just to speak to that, yeah, I think that was the next piece, is there was discussion around being consistent with code of conduct. I think this is the next step in the process.
So for clarification, is council wanting to endorse this resolution, or is it for staff to take it back and to bring back a report?
Well, the intent is, I believe, that we support it, going to AMO for.
So the consent agenda item 6.19 listed for the August 16th council meeting be received, and whereas the township Coast Lynch Council supports a resolution from the municipality of Great Islands regarding the municipal code of conduct, that council directs staff to send a support resolution accordingly to email.
Okay, mover, Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Goyda, on favor. Okay, Councilor Hurst, you have 6.22 and 6.23, they're basically the same issue.
Yeah, and in regards to rapidly escalating insurance costs, and I think this is applicable to the municipality. We've seen other communication on this over multiple meetings, and I think from my standpoint, it was more a recommendation back to staff to follow up. Have we seen any action on this collectively amongst the municipalities in Ontario? We've seen dialogue, arms ringing of escalating insurance costs. Let's collaborate and better understanding the situation for the collective benefit of reducing insurance costs. But what's actually been done about that? So I guess my recommendation is that staff follow up with your peer group, Courtney, within that CAO level to see if there is actually any tangible activity taking place beyond just arm wringing about insurance costs. Because I think if there is something, then great, let's take advantage of it and help us reduce our insurance costs heading into a budget cycle. So I think it was more, I see these in communication. I think there's really good recommendations, but I haven't seen any action out of it. And this isn't negative to township staff. I think it's more, let's be diligent, follow up and see if there are any tangible recommendations that come out of it to our benefit.
You have anything to?
So through Mr. Chair, perhaps an update, and then absolutely staff take this away. There has been a number of conversations over the last little while amongst the County of Wellington municipalities regarding utilizing sort of like group buying power in terms of putting out a request for proposal for all of the member municipalities that are looking to participate with the same insurance company. That comes with some challenges. Insofar that some municipalities do have some larger claims where they may not be in a position to kind of advance that sort of group buying when it comes to insurance. There's also some municipalities that have utilized, I believe it's a region of Waterloo, sort of a pooling insurance program. So that's also been investigated by the County of Wellington, the participating municipalities, not the county, sorry, but the member municipalities within the county. So there's been some discussions on alternative measures that could be taken to help reduce this. And so the township has been very active in those participation of those discussions. But we can certainly take this away and continue to see what sort of options could be presented to council.
Just a comment. So thank you for clarifying that, because I think it's important, and I think the fact that there is being work currently being done, I think is really important. And just to hear that is comforting from my standpoint as a counselor. And I think ultimately should be comforting to residents that that's going on. So I think, as we get into the next budget cycle and insurance costs ultimately be something there, the kids, the comments are continue focusing on that. I think it's time well spent.
Mr. Sand, you have something to add?
Yes, also I know that AMO has been sending out several surveys to two municipalities just to gather some information regarding the current policies that are in place at other municipalities. One of their next steps is to tackle the cyber insurance, and they're actually working on a feasibility study right now to determine if there's any opportunities for pooling that amongst Ontario municipalities. So that's something also on the go right now that AMO is, I believe last from AMO is heading up.
So is there any specific resolution, also Bruce, I'd like to make?
I think in hearing Ms. Whitefox describe the work that's already taking place, I think I'm fine from no resolution. I think it's just it's strategically important for the municipality to continue to focus on seeking out opportunities to collaborate and to reduce our insurance costs. I think just the clarity provided was sufficient from my standpoint.
I drafted something very brief that I think reflects Councillor Hurst's thoughts. So that consent agenda items 6.22 and 6.23 listed for the August 16th council meeting be received for information, and that council direct staff to continue to investigate and focus on potential opportunities to provide relief to the rising insurance costs.
Mover and second, please. Councillor Hurst, second by Councillor Bailey, all in favor? Okay, Councillor Guida, 6.12, and didn't realize 6.13 is the same as 6.12, so you could speak to both.
Sure, so these two are in regards to the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection Act, and just drawing attention to that, the current act is sort of out of date and doesn't deal appropriately with cost recovery and vexatious requests, things like that. And staff, through their questions that was circulated before, and indicated that, they experience these same kinds of challenges and would benefit greatly from having this act updated. And so I was hoping that we could support either the municipality of Chatham or South Huron, or both, in their efforts to get this legislation reviewed and updated.
Ms. Whitefox, have a resolution.
The consent agenda items 6.12 and 6.13 listed for the August 16th council meeting be received, and whereas the Township of Whistler Council supports a resolution from the municipality of Chatham, Kent regarding the need for changes and updating to the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, the council directs staff to send a support resolution accordingly.
Okay, mover, Councillor Gord, second, Councillor Hurst, all in favor? It's great. So, Ms. Whitefox, the remainders, are they captured in the, they are, that's great. Okay, so we have no delegations, moved, public meetings. There's two public meetings, wish to comment on them, Ms. Whitefox?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair, September 14th, 2023, there's an open house here at the Whistler Community Center at 23 Brock Road South. It's in person and also by electronic participation through Zoom. And this is regarding our local business open house. So this is in relation to to council's economic development initiatives. So notice has gone out. We've received quite a bit of positive feedback, so we expect a positive turnout. We are actually going, this isn't a public meeting, but we are going to the farmers market on the 26th of August as well, just to reach out to those groups. The next public meeting is September 27th, 2023. Again, here that's at the Whistler Community Center at 23 Brock Road South, and it'll again be a hybrid meeting, and that's relating to the proposed 2024 user fees and charges.
So at both of these will be presentations made as well, if it's a hard Zoom?
Yes, correct. There'll be a presentation, local businesses that will be in consultation with the county of Wellington. And then the user fees and charges will be by our Director of Finance.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's move into reports. Questions, Fire and Rescue Services now. Finance report, Ms. Whitefox, read the resolution.
That report FIN 2023-025 entitled 2024 proposed use of fees and charges be received, and that council direct staff to proceed with holding a public meeting on September 27th, 2023 at 7 p.m. to obtain public input on the proposed use of fees and charges as outlined in Schedule A to the report, and that staff report back to council with the results of the public meeting.
Okay, I have a move and second to bring that into discussion. Councilor Boyer, move.
Sure. Yeah.
Second, Councilor first. All in favor? Okay, Councilor Day, any questions, comments?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions. I guess I'm directing them to Mary.
Hello.
Hi, Mary. Just a question, the site alteration permit fee that's being proposed for normal farm practice, is that regardless of the project size? Or would a bigger project require more staff time that would require a higher permit fee?
I'll let Ms. Hoyt Fox speak to that. But I believe it was just one administration fee for any site alteration permit applications for normal farm practices, but I'll let Ms. Hoyt Fox add to that.
So for you, Mr. Chair, it is a flat fee regardless of the size, but it is cost recovery. So there is the likelihood the larger the project, the more third-party costs, and that would be borne by the applicant.
Okay, and that's clear at the application process to the applicant. Okay, great. I had a hard time distinguishing how the impact of the non-residential fee was on our income. I'm just wondering if there was a resident versus non-resident breakdown, or if we can figure out if the non-resident parts are actually helping bring in more funds.
So we do not break down in the system the resident versus non-resident. That would require a lot of further itemization and breakdown in the system. Basically, the purpose of the analysis there was to explain in 2019, prior to implementing the non-resident fee structure versus resident fee structure, the revenues were about 68,700. But after implementing it, the projected 2023 revenues are about 65,000. So that's what that table shows. That's the comparison of the total revenues at the PCC for 2019, and that was prior to the implementation of the non-resident surcharge. And then the 2023 projected is with the implementation of the non-resident surcharge after our COVID closures.
Okay, so can we draw the conclusion that a non-resident fee is not bringing in any extra funds?
Well, it's impacting revenues minimally, like it's decreased the revenues by about like $4,000 when compared to 2019. And so that's why staff's recommendation was to continue with the non-resident surcharge, because the difference is minimal.
Yeah, okay. And sorry, what's the suggested continuation of the pilot?
It's recommended to continue in place, just based on what we've seen. Like, we haven't recommended that it be for a pilot program. The schedules and the user fees and charges bylaw include both the resident and the non-resident fees, and we're recommending that it continue to be in place.
Okay, great, thank you. My other question is, I noticed that the lighting costs for tennis, baseball, and soccer are all different. And I'm just wondering if either we make it a consistent using the higher amount, or is there a reason why those are all different amounts?
So we looked at other municipalities just as it relates to baseball and soccer, and we noticed that there are other municipalities that do have different rates. And I'm just discussing it with the Director of Public Works. The maintenance associated with a soccer field is more than a baseball diamond. I can let Mike maybe speak to that more, but it does relate to the cost recovery and the maintenance aspects associated with soccer field versus a baseball diamond.
Okay, and from a lighting perspective is what my question was.
Mr. Fowler?
Yes, so from a lighting perspective, if we were to compare the tennis courts, which have 4 towers, 2 lights per tower, to say the ball diamond, which is almost triple that with the existing towers and 6 to 8 set of lights. It's just the cost recovery from operating these is a little bit higher than if we were to run the tennis courts. And then the same will go toward once the adult soccer field at the back is operational. And again, some cost recovery will go to the implementation, basically construction and maintenance moving forward.
And just a detail, but will all the lighting be the new, is it the LED or whatever the lighting is at the ball diamond? No?
Yeah,
Soccer.
so the PCC ball diamond is still the newest halogen type bulb, but Old Morriston is the new LED. The new soccer field is the new LED, but the tennis courts and the PCC ball diamond are still currently the halogen bulb, which, you know, does require a little more power, which equals higher operating costs. So that's the consideration for that.
Great, thank you, that explains that. My other question was, I noticed there was the ball dragging fee. Is that put on the renter? And if so, when does that happen?
So this was a previous council resolution from 2016, and it says upon request and approval. I'll let the director speak more to the ball diamonds dragging fee.
Yeah, so initially the ball dragging fee was established when certain teams were requesting that the ball diamonds be dragged after every use. With that being said, the operational standpoint is now that all ball diamonds are dragged regardless. But we chose to keep the fee in just for the additional equipment and staff time to make sure these ball diamonds are dragged every single day after use from the previous night.
So the cost of that is being recovered?
Yes, we are still within our budget to provide this service level.
Great, thank you. And then just a comment on the advertising. So the ball diamond advertising and the board advertising. I kind of think our board advertising is low. and where I'm coming from is for rep hockey, we ask sponsors to sponsor the team, and we have different levels of sponsorship. And we go from the lowest being 300 or 400 to 800 to 1200. So I know there's businesses out there that are willing to pay more for advertising. And I just wonder if there's been any talk or any discussion on how we can be maybe upping that and then providing a campaign to try to encourage local businesses. And maybe that's something we could bring up at our open house that's coming up, about advertising at the boards and at the ball diamonds, upping the fees, providing advertising on the Zamboni, perhaps. Anyway, I'm just wondering if we can speak to whether there's opportunity to provide a sort of campaign for advertising at the ball diamonds and the rink.
So I know recently, and Justine can maybe speak to this a little bit more, but I know that we recently increased our social media presence as it relates to the ball diamond and the advertising of the ball diamond and the orc advertising, the board advertising. And I believe we also included it in our newsletter in August, but maybe Justine can just speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, we are working on incorporating that more into our social media. So making people aware that we're offering this, I think it will also naturally fall into the economic development. So we are looking at various options to increase awareness about the advertising opportunities within the township.
Great. So if I can suggest we have some of that information available or a pamphlet on how to advertise on the boards for that open house that we're having for the local businesses, I think that would be good time to bring that in, because I feel like it's kind of a lost opportunity to be bringing in funds that can just help, buy, resupply the gym with the equipment it needs in there, all these little costs that come up that we could be kind of capitalizing on. So thanks for that. Good. My last question, the new picnic shelters that are going to be at Borum and the PCC grounds, are they going to be available for renting?
So there is a per day and per hour fee in the user fees and charges bylaw as it relates to picnic shelters. But I'll let the director speak more to that as well after the construction project is complete.
Yeah, so at the moment, there wasn't a consideration to independently offer the picnic shelters as rentals. This is something that can be investigated moving forward, whether it be identifying the structure as reserved for a certain party, but because they are both located in a public park, the challenge will be coordinating it off or like showing that it's not available for public use and that it's currently reserved for a rental. So that is something that once the park is up and running and we actually know the exact dimensions of these shelters, that we can offer some type of rental charge.
Okay, yeah, I hadn't thought through the logistics. What is the process right now at Morriston Meadows when someone wants to rent that pavilion? How do we let the public know it's rented?
I believe, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, from an operational standpoint, basically, we do not have a lot of rentals for the picnic pavilion, so there's not really, we haven't run into any incidences where it's been rented and another user group has been using it. So basically, until we run into a conflict between two groups, will we then identify the structure as rented on that certain day. But at this time, it's basically rented. It's cleaned and prepared and the renter uses it.
But Councillor Bailey, just to answer your question, right now the Morriston Meadows Picnic Shelter, we do have it in our facility scheduler module to be rented, and also on our website it does show when it is rented and not available for public use. So should we go forward with an approach for renting these picnic shelters, we could utilize a similar approach to our current picnic shelter.
Great. So do we need to add those in at this time, or wait, are you suggesting we wait for the 2025?
Well, I'm suggesting that our current user fees and charges bylaw does have a picnic shelter daily rate and a per hour rate. I wouldn't suggest that we have a separate rate for each park, but we could apply the rate that's currently in our bylaw.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all.
Councilor Hurst.
Thanks. One question and one comment. I think just in going through it, very thorough, seeing that most of the price increases or the cost increases are between 1% and 3%. I thought that was incredibly fair given the inflationary pressures that, as a society we're facing. So I think that was just an observation. From my perspective, and I don't need an answer right now, but I think for the public meeting coming up next month, I'm curious if any benchmarking can be done with other municipalities, just to say, here's the fee structure that we have, and here's how, in general terms, it compares to other municipalities and in similar situations. So I'm thinking sports rentals would be a good benchmark, would be, say, Guelph-Aramosa or the city of Guelph, those type of things, just to give a flavor as to where the cost structure lies within our municipality versus other municipalities to help with the narrative. I think that was just where my head goes. I didn't have a lot of really detailed questions. I thought it was quite thorough as to what was included in the report.
Councilor Gordon.
Thank you. I guess just to start, I wanted to just say, Councilor Bailey, I think that's an absolutely fantastic idea to bring up the idea of the advertising opportunities at the open house for business. I think that's a great way Also, just to let you know, it is a discussion as well at the rec committee, so we are working on some great. I just have one question, and it's regards to the planning fees that incorporate county planning fee disbursements. I am just wondering how that gets handled in the case where if there's certain timeframes that we're legislated to make a decision, and if the decision isn't made within that timeframe, we may be required to give partial or full refund for the planning fee. And I'm just curious how that is handled when the fee is part township, part county. Like, is the township fully on the hook for that refund, or is it shared proportionately with the county should a refund be required? You know?
So through you, Mr. Chair, where we are billing the applicant directly for the county's third-party costs. So for instance, with the zoning bylaw and the way it's structured right now, the township receives a bill for their services related to that application. That's not included in the prorated refund that's not our interpretation at this moment of how we would refund. It would be the township's administration fee that would be subject to the refund.
So even though the township is collecting it as part of the application fee, it's not, it's a separate item.
So to you, Mr. Chair, my understanding is, this is a similar approach that other municipalities are taking. This new legislation under Bill 109, I don't believe has been tested where it comes to refunds and what's refunded. So we're in line with some of the other municipalities that are looking at the township application fee being the administrative fee that's subject to the refund.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, thank you. I had my questions answered. Ms. White had two suggestions made, one by Councilor Bailey with respect to the advertising being mentioned at the business meeting, and the other by Councilor Hurst with respect to having benchmarking of the fees charged by other municipalities. Wait, we need to have that as a motion, or can we just say that's the motion as discussed?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the Councilor Bailey's motion, we certainly will bring some pamphlets to all of our events related to the business program. Mary, I would look to you to see if you'd like specific direction on Councilor Hurst's remark about benchmarking.
Yeah, so benchmarking all of these user fees and charges, there's a significant number of them. And we have benchmarked in the past, like, I don't remember exactly which year, but we did do a very detailed analysis of what our fees are in comparison to other municipalities in a prior year. And that did take a significant amount of time just because of the number of user fees and the number of other municipalities that we compared ourselves to. When we do propose a new fee or change a fee more than the CPI for Ontario, we do our benchmarking at that step as well in terms of what other municipalities are charging for similar fees. So we do this benchmarking on a yearly basis as part of our annual review of user fees and charges. So what I'm understanding from Councillor Hurst's direction is that we want to do a detailed analysis of all of our user fees and charges and compare them to what other municipalities charge.
Yeah, I think that based on your explanation, Mrs. Sam, that probably seems like an excessive amount of work for staff. Maybe a middle ground here would be potentially pick 10 to a dozen of the high frequency SKUs that you deal with and benchmark those to form a narrative for the public consultation that would allow you to say, look, here's the high frequency user fees that are typically incurred on an annual basis. Here are the 10 or 12. And here's our proposed changes, and here's how they compare to other municipalities. So you don't have to go through the entire process of the 100 odd particular SKUs, but you can form a narrative to show the public that I think as a municipality, we're cognizant of the fee structure, and we need to ensure that it's comparable to other regions, but also not to have to go through that, you know, lengthy, time-consuming process of the staff level to generate that. Does that feel like a reasonable landing point?
Was Simon comfortable with that, taking 10?
So the high frequency ones, because there are a lot of high frequency user fees and charges that are very low dollar amount, like for example, tax certificates. Do you want higher dollar value thresholds?
Yeah, I think probably I would leave it to staff to determine, you know, what the high touch point ones are. I think from my perspective, you know, if we have some that are more frequently used by residents in terms of the number of the number of permits issued or whatever, however you want to coin it, I think that would be my filter. But I guess I'll maybe leave it to staff to feel what the best 10 or 12 are. You would know that better than I do. I think it's more the direction being, let's benchmark some of the high touch point ones.
I think the intent is to show that we're reasonable and fair. We're not excessive compared to other municipalities for some of these facilities.
Okay, yeah. So would that be as part of the September 27th council meeting, or as part of our 2024 user fees and charges process?
Councillor Hurst is suggesting we have it available for your public presentation so the public can see and be aware that we're fair and reasonable type of thing.
Okay,
In other words, have a separate slide, say, by the way, here's some indications of some of the fees, and our charges are this, another member of the municipality has these, and we're reasonable.
okay, sounds good.
So could you read the resolution?
That report FIN 2023-025 entitled 2024 proposed user fees and charges be received, and the council directs staff to proceed with holding a public meeting on September 27th, 2023 at 7 p.m. to obtain public input on the proposed user fees and charges bylaw as outlined in Schedule H of the report. And that council directs staff to select approximately 10 high frequency user fees and perform a benchmark analysis to demonstrate that the township's user fees are comparable to similar municipalities for the public open house presentation. And that staff report back to council with the results of the public meeting.
Okay, great. So mover, Council Hurst, second. Council Bailey, all in favor? Okay, so we're approaching 1 o'clock, so I suggest that we move into the break and then have a 5-minute break and then we move into close.
So we'll break and then we'll come back and open and read the resolution for close and then.
Okay, fair enough. Let's slow down. We're back. So we'll start with our roll call. Council Bailey,
Present.
Council Hurst,
Present.
Council Goyda,
Present.
Council Spilson, present as well. Next resolution.
Yes, the council shall go into closed session under section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of item 14.1, a confidential report regarding litigation, potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. This is in relation to Ontario Land Tribunal matter. Confidential item 14.2 regarding a verbal report around personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. This is relating to a human resource matter. And then item 14.3, a number of confidential council minutes from previous closed meetings.
Okay, we have a mover and a second. Move for Council Goyda, seconded by Council Bailey, all in favor?
The council moves into open session at 2 p.m.
Okay, mover and seconder, Council Bailey, Council Bailey, second Council Hurst, all in favor? Great. So we move on to. Go ahead.
Yes. The council received the confidential report regarding litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. And that was related to an Ontario Land Tribunal matter. Confidential verbal report regarding personal matters of an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and advice that is subject solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and that's related to a human resource matter. And then confidential minutes from a number of previous closed meetings, and that staff proceed as directed.
Okay, move and second, move by Council, just second by Council Bailey, all in favor? We're. So we move into reports. Next one I have is 9.3.1. So would you read the resolution and that one?
This is the Arkle Trails parking and speeding update.
Correct.
And that report ADM 2023-037 entitled Arkle Trails parking and speeding update be received.
Mover, Council Boyd, second by Council Hurst, all in favor? Over for discussion, Council Bailey.
Thank you. I guess in light of the report we had earlier with the roads management plan. Let's go. I'm just wondering, would a request like this then, how it would relate to the plan that we're looking at establishing? So delegations come forward, they're asking about lowering the speed limit, I think the request was. And so how would this kind of follow through the plan that's being proposed? Sorry to put you on the spot for that.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the first part of this would be to assess the road authority. So whether it was Arkle Road being a county road or whether Watson or what have you being township. So it would filter through in that way, and likely we would provide a response if it was related to Arkle to contact the county. And then from there, the roads management plan includes different tools related to speed to do that assessment. If we have the TAC report or a speed study, that would also be helpful. And then if it was related to traffic calming measures, we would take a look at what the criteria was for that. And if an action was recommended based on the roads management plan, that would come to council through budget. So it wouldn't be that the township staff would necessarily be making decisions on these responses if action was suggested with the council decision.
Okay, so, and I know we've been recording comments from the public. So is this one in particular being added to that list? Requests, or how does that work?
So through you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly add this to the request. I know that there was some other discussion about connecting with the city of Guelph and the GRCA, specifically around creating parking areas and that sort of thing. But we have already passed on to the county regarding the Black Cat and some speed enforcement mitigation there.
Great. Okay. Good. And then, yeah, I understood or read in the report that the Black Cat is due for 2023. Will we automatically be getting the results of that, or do we need to request that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the answer to that. We can follow up and find out how that will be communicated to the township.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Good. Councilor Bush.
Yeah, I think really the only question I had would be, the speed thing, which I think is underway. The parking, and I drove by there twice today. And there were a number of cars parked out there. I think even if lengthening the amount of pavement on the side of the road to accommodate parking that isn't just on the gravel with one tire of pavement, I think would maybe be a really reasonable solution there if ultimately developing standalone parking isn't going to happen for various reasons. Maybe there's some plan B options. I guess in my mind, I look at it like Starkley Trail or Starkley Hill would be like the ideal situation where you have designated parking, it's widely used, but in the absence of that, if we can extend the shoulders of the road with paving, maybe that's a moderate solution here, because I think what happens now is people impede traffic with one tire kind of on the pavement, one in the gravel, and it becomes a hazard as well. So that would be my main build on what we're doing now. I'll stop there.
Okay, Councilor Gordon.
Yeah, I think, just in terms of the trails themselves, I think it's really good to see that the trails are getting so well used. But I agree, the parking can be hazardous. And I would just, because this report indicated that the city of Guelph is consulting on a management plan for the area, I don't exactly know what that entails or what the intent of that plan is. But it sounds like they're doing some kind of planning for the future, I guess, outcome of what that land will be. So, I was hoping that maybe we could, it seems like now would be a good time to sort of ask the city of Guelph that if they are looking to continue to offer those trails on, there's actually two access points. There's one across from Starkey Hill, and then there's also one on Watson Road, kind of like in between the two hills. That one in particular can be hazardous for people parking on the side and speeds of cars going past. So if they're planning for future works there anyways, maybe they can look at parking considerations as part of that plan. So I was hoping to ask them, and then since we're on the topic anyway, I know GRCA has said that they don't have any plans for future parking, but just to sort of put it on their radar that perhaps we send them a letter as well, asking that, you know, if and when they consider doing any future upgrades or planning work to the trails, the bottom of Watson Road, that they look at potentially adding parking considerations as well.
I don't have any specific questions, select box, understand you have a resolution along the lines that Councilor Wood has spoken.
The report ADM 2023-037 entitled Arkle Trails Parking and Speeding Update be received, and whereas the city of Guelph is undertaking consultation regarding the Arkle Spring Ground Management Plan for potential future uses. And whereas there are currently two access points for trail systems, including one on Arkle Road and one on Watson Road South. And whereas there's currently insufficient parking causing vehicles to park on the shoulder of the roads, the council directs staff to send correspondence to the city of Guelph, requesting that parking options be included in the considerations for the Arkle Spring Ground Management Plan. And that council directs staff to send similar correspondence to the GRCA, requesting parking options to be considered to the Watson Road trails, if and when upgrades or maintenance to the area are planned.
Okay, now a mover and second, moved by Councilor Wood, second by Councilor Bailey, all in favor?
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, we move on to 932.
The report ADM 2023-03 entitled Sign Variance Request for 6981 Concession Road for Whistling, the Donkey Sanctuary of Canada. Be received.
Okay, now we move on to second, moved by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Okay, Councilor Bailey.
No concerns with it. I believe, and maybe Courtney can confirm, that they're requesting the sign be where the current cedar rail fence is at.
So you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to defer to Deputy Clerk.
Okay.
To you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay, so there's already an existing sort of structure, if you will, and they just want to add a sign to where that structure already is. I have no concern. I think it's great to help promote the Donkey Sanctuary.
Councilor Hurst.
No questions. I don't perceive it as a safety issue from a road standpoint. Good.
No, I have no concerns.
And I have no concerns as well.
So that council approved the request for relief from the sign bylaw 09-91 to permit a sign with a reduced setback of 11.28 meters from the center line of the road.
Okay, motion by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Coyle, all in favor? Okay. 9.3.4, site alteration.
The report ADM 2023-040 entitled Site Alteration Agreement for 7176 Concession 1 be received.
Mover and second, any discussion? Mover Councilor Gordon, seconded by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Okay, Council Bailey.
Thank you. I guess I was just looking for a little clarification on why, and I don't know if staff has that information. But I'm curious why we're looking at a 3-meter berm. You know?
So through you, Mr. Chair, so it would be sort of anecdotal information. It's not necessarily outlined in their application, but this is a residential use on the property primarily. It's a larger property, but around the house. So just through conversations, it seems like a little bit of a privacy issue.
Okay. And then from the report, I'm understanding that there's a modification of a farm pond happening. Do we know what modification of a farm pond means?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe they are filling in a portion of the pond.
I have a look at the drawings. Basically, what they're doing is relocating it in kind, same volume, just taking the soil from the to be dug area.
So then I'm just concerned that by changing pond area, there could be effects to neighboring properties. Has this been looked at?
So through you, Mr. Chair, through our review process, any applicable agency having jurisdiction would be circulated, so Conservation Authority. It's also reviewed in detail by the township engineer from a grading and drainage.
Okay, and do we know the timeline for the project?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe they're ready to commence kind of once we've gone through this process, approved the agreement, received securities, and then they would be looking to complete. And in general, through our site alteration bylaw, there's a 1-year timeline for completion. And then if they require an extension, there could be a 6-month extension after that.
Okay. And is this project triggering any notification to neighbors?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, this will not require any notification to neighbors under our site alteration bylaw. Only applications that are dealing with an importation of an excess in 1,000 cubic meters of fill requires notification.
And I think they're pretty. The neighbor is not that close anyway, but. Anyway, thank you.
Good, Councilor.
No questions. I think this seemed fairly straightforward, and looking at the aerial images, it didn't look like any adjacent landowners would be impacted. And I think the only clarification, native fill, can I just get a clarification on what is defined as native fill?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's fill that is or soil that's existing on the property. So no soil is being imported to the property. It's everything that's there currently.
Okay. Thank you. That was the one red flag I had, is what is being utilized to fill in the I'm good for questions.
Councilor.
I have no questions.
And I have no questions as well.
So that council gives 3 readings to bylaw 2023-034, being a bylaw to authorize the entering into a site alteration agreement with Mr. John Baranski, and further that prior to execution of the agreement by the mayor and the clerk, the applicant submit securities in a form satisfactory to the township in the amount of $21,000.
Okay, mover and seconder, Council Clare, seconded by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Good. Okay, move on to 9.3.6. Committee of Adjustment. Goals and objectives.
So through you, Mr. Chair, so this report was presented or prepared, by our development and legislative coordinator, Ms. Banks. So she's not here today to present, but similar to our other advisory committees, our Committee of Adjustment, as well as our Planning and Development Advisory Committee, have gone through the process of setting goals and objectives for their term, and they're outlined in the report. And this report is before council for endorsement.
So, read the resolution.
That report ADM 2023-042 entitled 2022 to 2026 Committee of Adjustment Goals and Objectives be received, and that council approved the 2022 to 2026 Committee of Adjustment Goals and Objectives as presented.
Okay, mover, Councilor Hurst, seconder, Councilor Gordon, all in favor, bring the discussion. Okay, go on the table. Councilor David.
I just had one question. I'm not seeing it on the report though. I've written down, what does process improvement questionnaire mean?
Basically, what that means is, people who have come through the process, in other words, made submissions, we want to find out what their good things and bad things were about it, and then improve on them.
Okay, I like that. Okay, great, thank you. I think that's a good goal.
Okay, Council Hurst,
No questions.
Council Gordon,
No questions.
okay, so, okay, we vote already, okay, let's move on to the second one. 3.7.
Yes, so thank you through Mr. Chair. This is similar report, but for our planning and advisory committee goals and objectives. So same description, they've outlined goals for endorsement by council.
So, can you read the resolution, please?
The report ADM 2023-043 entitled 2022 to 2026 Planning and Development Advisory Committee Goals and Objectives be received. And the council approved the Planning and Development Advisory Committee Goals and Objectives as presented.
Okay, so may I have a mover and a second? Council Gordon, second by Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Okay, Councilor Bailey.
So, to the question, the development of key considerations, is there any already established either through legislation or policy or something that guides those considerations that the committee should already be considering?
You're talking about housekeeping?
No, the development of key considerations is the goal, second one down.
So I look into
It suggests that a subcommittee is just gonna come up with the list. but-
It is, basically, the Planning and Development Advisory Committee only provides comments, we're not a decision body, so if there's a development that comes through, we make our report, our comments available to council. Likewise, if there's a severance type of thing that goes, our comments are put forward to the Land Division Committee at the county. So basically, key considerations, we might be saying, okay, we're looking at the area, say on Brock Road. The Brock Road has design guidelines, so that would be a consideration there to ensure that applicable areas of the design guidelines are adhered to. So there might be, for instance, we might comment on the Brock Road development. Our concern there was hours of operation. Our concern was noise type of thing. So things of that nature, if we had a checklist, be helpful just to pull through it rather than each, we're trying to remember what's going on.
I see. So you're essentially gonna grab existing documents that you can then refer to.
It is a checklist of items we should deal with when we're considering a particular element.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Councilor,
No questions.
Mr. Gordon,
No questions.
and I have no questions. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, 9.38.
And so through you, Mr. Chair, this is a report regarding the Crawley Road City of Guelph site plan control application review. So this is been before council in relation to their minor variance for relief for the development. So the recommendation, if I may, is that report ADM 2023-044 entitled Crawley Road City of Guelph site plan control application SPA review be received. And that council directs staff to submit the peer reviews attached to Schedule A to Schedule C to the City of Guelph for consideration when reviewing the SPA application for completeness in accordance with the Planning Act. And that council directs staff to forward the application materials of peer review to the Source Water Protection Team for comments as recommended by the Township Hydrogeologist.
Okay, I have a mover and a second to bring it on to discussion with the council first, second by council Whittle, favor. Thank you, so council Bailey.
I have no more questions.
Council Hill.
No questions. I thought it was good.
Good.
I also have no questions.
Okay, I'm good as well. Okay, so we need to go.
You voted.
We voted, great. Okay, next one. Building department.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I don't see our CPO online. I know our Director of Finance is here. I don't see our customer service and taxation supervisor online either for presenting the report.
Prepared it. It's just our regular quarterly report for the building department, and we can try to answer any questions that council may have.
That report, the BLD 2023-003 entitled Building Department Second Quarter Update, April to June 2023. Be received.
Okay, I will move in a second, moved by Councilor Bush, second by Councilor Bailey, all in favor? Okay, Councilor,
Yeah, no questions.
Councilor has no questions.
No question.
I have no questions as well. Okay, so will we vote on that as well?
You do.
Okay, they will now on to rec department.
So the report REC 2023-0003 entitled Roller Skating Free Drop-In Time at the Orc Rink Mid-Term Pilot Program Results be received.
Okay, and we have a couple other ones here as well.
We do, so I can read out the recommendation, that staff report back to council on the results of the pilot program at the end of 2023 season, including number of participants that attended, and that Schedule A to report outlines the number of participants during the free drop-in fluid schedule and free drop-in schedule programming for the roller skating pilot program at the Orc Rink from May 22nd to July 30th, 2023. And that the following drop-in schedule at the Orc Rink be offered for the remainder of the 2023 season based on the number of participants outlined in the schedule to the report. And the schedule itself outlines a seasonal schedule with inline shinny on Tuesdays and roller skating on Thursdays and Fridays.
Okay, I move in second, moved by Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Okay, so start with you, Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, I'm really excited to see the inline shinny on there, and thanks staff for responding to the comments that have come in. I've heard some requests for that, and I know staff had, and they've responded to it. I think that's fantastic. It does lead me to wonder about whether we need to be requiring hockey helmets for kids for inline skating and shinny. I'm not sure what the requirement will be for that and how it's going to be enforced. And my other comment was I did talk to a few kids that they are bused out to the French school, and I know high school kids that are bused and come back. And I'm just concerned that 4:30 is kind of too early for any of those kids to be able to take advantage of the shinny time. So I'm wondering if there was opportunity to do a 3 to 5, just to be able to kind of cater to those kids that might have a later bus home.
So through Mr. Chair, I would look to both our Director of Finance and Director of Public Works to speak to if we could extend that Tuesday inline shinny to 5 p.m. I don't know what the schedule or programming looks like for Tuesday afternoons.
I can speak operationally. That time would fall in between, kind of call the witching hour, where full-time staff are leaving and students currently are not in yet. I can look at possibly seeing if students are available to come in a little earlier. This could pose a problem once school begins again. The only other option would be trying to arrange full-time staff to stay a little later, just as long as some type of staff member is there for accountability.
Yeah, I don't want there to be any, budgetary impacts, having full-time staff staying, or having, kids have to come in earlier to work. But if we could try to extend that, that'd be great to look into. And then also just my question about whether we need them wearing hockey helmets during shinny.
The township could request that youths under the age of 16. It will be mandatory. It could be mandatory to wear hockey helmets. It'll be very similar to the regulations we have when the ice is in.
I think keeping that consistency should be easy for the, for the public. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor first.
Thanks. I think Councilor Bailey nailed the question I had was around pushing the safety aspect of helmets. So I'm supportive of a similar policy as to what would happen in the winter. That's all the questions I had.
Councilor Goyette.
Yeah, my questions have both been answered as well, so, yeah, I'm in support.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is helmets, anybody under 16, and seeing if we can move the 4:30 to 5 o'clock if there's no budgetary impact. Yeah, go ahead.
Just had a question maybe for Justine. Do you think, I know the numbers are a little bit low, and I'm wondering if we were to kind of start advertising the inline skating versus the roller skating, do you think that would have an impact on like changing the audience and getting more people out? Or is that something we can try and see if it makes a difference?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we will be revamping how we're advertising based on this. So we will go out and change all of our advertisements to include inline skating as well for the remainder of this season.
Yeah, I just feel like some people think, oh, I don't have roller skates, or I don't have. That was a long time ago kind of thing, whereas, the new thing is the inline skating. So you never know, it might grab a few more participants.
Okay. So resolution.
So the resolution that was read earlier is the same with the additions of the council direct staff to implement a mandatory requirement for hockey helmets for youth 16 years and younger, and the council direct staff to extend the Tuesday inline shinny program to 5 p.m. only if possible with no budgetary impacts.
Okay, mover and second, with the Councilor Bailey, second and Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Great. Okay, so we move into correspondence.
The council receives correspondence item 10.1 regarding the County of Wellington progress report number 9, official plan review update for information.
Okay, mover and second, with the Councilor Boyd, second with the Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Okay, so let's go around the table again, Councilor Bailey.
I don't really have any questions right now. Thank you.
Councilor Hurst,
No questions.
Councilor Boyd.
Also no questions.
Okay, so Ms. Whitebox, I understand that they are coming in to give us a presentation on this.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, we have the county policy team scheduled to be here September 27th.
Good, very much. All right, so do we have to move in second? Or
We have it all.
We have it all.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, next item.
The council receives correspondence item 10.2, County of Wellington OPP detachment response to council resolution 2023-123 for information.
Okay, mover and seconder. Councilor Doyle.
Yeah.
Second from Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Okay, Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, I don't know who I'm going to ask this question to. I'll just say what my questions are. I'm just wondering, the OPP suggests that they collect a lot of the data, but I'm wondering if it's interpreted. So if the data is actually looked at and interpreted, and if so, is there sort of a proactive communication report or something that would highlight any areas of concern? Otherwise, where is the data presented? Is it just through the Police Services Board, or is it?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I believe we talked a little bit about this earlier, just clarifying when the Black Cat speed data is collected, if the township could receive that communication. So we're looking into that, and that relates to this as well.
And then again, I think we've talked about this before, but when a speed limit has been changed, there's obviously service level impacts to the OPP. And from our perspective, a service level means a budgetary impact. So I'm not clear how we can just go about changing a speed limit without knowing there's resources, to follow through with the change. So maybe that's a question we can also be asking OPP how that process works. So if we make a change, we notify OPP, or do they automatically, yes, have the resources to follow through with that, or no, you need to wait till our next budget year cycle. I'm just not clear on how the ripple effect of us changing a speed limit is impacted to the OPP.
Anything else, Councilor Bennett?
That's all, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Hurst.
Yeah, I think the only comment I had is I would look for clarification of what information you actually received back from the OPP so that it can inform decision making. I think that was the gap when I read the report. Beyond that, yeah, as a new counselor, I would be interested in having a delegation at some point from the OPP in terms of, their role that they feel they play within the municipality, so that we can have a fruitful conversation around, what recommendations we have. But I think that's beyond the scope of this particular report.
Good, Councilor Good.
Thanks. I don't really have any additional comments.
Okay, so I don't have any comments here, so, Ms. Fox, read out the resolution.
The council received correspondence item 10.2, County Wellington OPP detachment response to council resolution 2023-123. And the council directs staff to inquire with the OPP regarding how a speed limit change impacts their service levels and any budgetary impacts that should be considered. And the council directs staff to request the OPP to provide information to Placentia Council on a go-forward basis that includes the data collected through OPP complaints as well as through the speed monitoring Black Cat device.
Please cover it, okay. All right, mover and second. Councilor Bailey, second, Councilor West, all in favor? All right.
Next, council received the correspondence item 10.3, 2022 groundwater monitoring and 2022 ecological and aquatic monitoring report for Roselle Pit for information. And that staff forward the information report and peer review to the pit operator for comment.
Okay, mover and second. The Councilor West, second, the Councilor Cueto, all in favor? All right, so let's go around the table, Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. I think there was a comment in the questions that someone else may be following through on, but I mean, this is very frustrating to just continue to get reports that are saying there's a problem and nothing's getting done. So I don't know if we just keep receiving the reports and forwarding it on and receiving a report, forwarding on. It feels like we're just banging our heads against the wall and nothing's happening. So I'm just wondering if there's any directions, some recommendations staff might have. Like in the report, it's clear that Hart is stating that the below water table excavation has exacerbated the natural condition, resulting in water levels that are 40 to 50 centimeters lower than would otherwise have occurred in areas south and east of the pit. So that's, it's a clear statement and it's not wishy-washy, it's a definite issue. So I'm just not sure what more we can be doing.
Ms. Whitebox,
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think council's member comment agrees with staff's frustration on the matter as well. I would say in general, staff does not get a response from the ministry. So I think it's a bigger conversation that's taking place. I know TAPMO was successful in getting a delegation with the ministry, and township staff are helping prepare some correspondence specifically related to the inaction approved by the ministry. Given that they are the only enforcement tool that the township has available. So we are outlining that, and that will be presented by TAPMO at AMO coming up. So we'll take those reports and share them with council as well. I think it's important to see a history of the correspondence that council has passed. We've dated it back to about 2018. So we'll bring that forward as well. But again, just in terms of how to bring action here, we're trying to find alternative ways and continuing that discussion with the PIP operator as well.
Do we know when the delegation is, TAPMO?
It is the 20th of August, so it's coming up on Sunday.
That's something we can attend without registering for the conference?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that you have to, when you register for a delegation, you have to state who's coming. So I don't think it's like an open forum. Yeah,
Council Bailey,
Thank you.
Council Hurst.
I think Councilor Bailey noted the questions I had. Courtney, I'm glad to see some action here to some degree. I think my direction would be is let's drive this. Don't take the foot off the gas. And I wasn't here in the last 4 years of council, but this is something even just as a regular resident in the area, it's out there as like just a pain point. So let's keep the foot on the gas to whatever levers we have. Let's use them.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Councillor Bailey said it, it's frustrating. I think this is my 5th year on council, and I feel like I have read the almost exact same report 5 years in a row. And so nothing has changed, nothing sort of, the responses are, if any, are very vague and deflecting. It is very frustrating. So I kind of, have the same sentiment as Councillor Bailey, like almost like throwing your hands in the air. What can we do? So I'm glad to hear that staff are investigating sort of other means of sort of working through it. Ms. Whitebox, I don't know if you can, the delegation that TAPMO has, do they have like a report sort of outlining this particular pit, sort of like a timeline of these are the concerns, this was the result, this was the concern, this was the result, just sort of like as a sort of a clear example as to why we're bringing forward this concern? Do they have that information that they can use in the presentation during the delegation?
so through you, Mr. Chair, so staff are preparing that. So it's not specific to Roselle, but because we've had a number of different compliance issues with other pits. So it's a document that outlines the issues with compliance with pits in Fuss Lynch and in general. But I think what staff will then do with that report is break that off for Roselle pit, because I think there's ongoing environmental and different sorts of issues with Roselle that we want some immediate action on. TAPMO's delegation though is not targeting any one pit. It's in general, it's looking at sort of looking to highlight with the ministry the lack of participation from the ministry when we've asked for assistance with enforcement. But we can certainly kind of revise that and tailor it more to Roselle pit when we bring it back to council.
Okay, so intent is to bring it back to council with so the timeline of what happened, bang, 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 and then we carry on from there. Council Hurst, you had your hand.
Just a quick comment. I think as part of the delegation, there's a larger narrative that isn't just pit specific, but I think maybe this particular pit and the timeline associated with it would be a good example to be provided to the government officials as part of the delegation as an example of the circumstance that exists when no actions taken, so you can kind of have the larger narrative, but this is a really good example of a degree of frustration at the municipal level. Just maybe a comment if there's the potential to foster that narrative, this might be a good opportunity.
So Fox, the resolution.
So the council receives correspondence item 10.3, and the council directs staff to send the report and peer review to the pit operator and the MNRF and requests that a response be provided to the township on actions being taken to address council's ongoing concerns. And the council directs staff to provide the TAPMO delegation materials to council at an upcoming meeting for consideration.
And you'll be coming back with a report to council.
And so with the delegation materials, I've taken that to mean we'll also just revise it and tailor it specifically to Roselle for council's consideration. And I heard Councillor Hurst's comment. I think it's a very valuable comment. We'll try to work that into TAPMO's materials as well.
Fair enough. Okay, move in second. Moved by Councilor Lourdes, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Great, thank you. 10.4.
So that council receives correspondence item 10.4, 2022 groundwater monitoring for Cox Lynch Pit Northeast Extension 625710 for information.
Okay, we'll move in second. Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Lourdes, all in favor? Okay, start with you, Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, I have no comments.
Councilor Hurst.
No questions.
No questions. I have no questions as well, so we're good. Okay, 10.5.
The council receives correspondence item 10.5, Highway 6 Hanlon Express Mid-Block Interchange Design Build Project. And that staff recommend that the township traffic engineer consultant be requested to review the design in relation to the hotspots as previously directed by council.
Okay, move in second, Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Great, so let's move on, Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. I love the suggestion of having the data. What's the word, translated for us lay people. I'm sure Councillor Sepoulas loved looking at all of those graphics, but to me, that was very overwhelming. So I look forward to seeing a follow-up report.
Yeah, I had honestly no idea what I was.
Neither 101. Okay, so we need to,
You're good if we voted on that, you're all right. Just as a follow-up, Councillor Sepoulas had asked to check into what our budget was for that. It's $5,000. Council had already included that review, so it's great timing. Good.
great, all right, so let's go to council reports. Mayor updates, going for the mayor, I have no update. Council member reports, let's start with you, Councilor Bailey.
Yeah, just from the youth committee, sounds like we might not have everything yet set in stone, but we are anticipating and hoping that at the fall fair, the date is the 8th and the 9th. The youth committee's going to be providing some activities in the gym and in the rink area, as long as everything goes as planned. And it's catered a little bit more to the older kids. We had a comment from one of our members that she's sort of outgrown the bouncy castles and was looking for something a little bit more that her age could do. So we thought we'd have some activities in the rink and then some activities in the gym. So stay tuned for some of that. And we do have, again, if everything goes as planned, maybe Justine can confirm, September 24th, we're planning a sports day. So again, that'll be happening here on the grounds, and there'll be some different sport activities that the youth can come and participate in. And another date for the calendar, the Bad Knob Barbecue is going to be in September this year, and we've got the 16th slotted for that community barbecue. And I just wanted to let everyone know Puss Lynch Minor Ball had a really successful year this year. We had 6 different teams plus T-ball plus 3-pitch. So we had a lot of teams on the go this year. We just last weekend had the year-end tournament and our U11 black team came first and our U11 gray team came third, which was amazing. The U9s came first in their division. So we had 3 teams that all medaled, which was fantastic. And then this weekend, we're not hosting it, we're just providing the ball diamonds. But the U13 tournament will be in Puss Lunch this weekend. And so we wish our U13 team good luck. But it's been a really successful year for Puss Lunch Minor Ball.
Okay, thank you. Councilor,
I don't have anything to share.
Councilor Gordon,
I don't have anything either, but thank you, Councillor Bailey. That's great to hear about baseball. That's good.
and I don't have anything to do.
Okay,
Okay, go ahead.
the council received the mayor's and council member updates for information.
Mover, second, Councilor Gordon, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, bylaws.
That the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed into the council. Bylaw 2023-034 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a site alteration agreement with John Baranski, and bylaw 2023-035 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 2022-046 being the township's procedural bylaw for the meetings of council.
Okay, mover and second, moved by Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst, all in favor? Great, thank you. Any announcements, Councilor Bailey?
So some of those were announcements, I guess.
Councilor Hurst? No. Councilor Gordon?
No.
Okay, and I don't have any either. 15, business arising from the closed session, do you have any? No. Okay, notice of motion, do you have any? Okay, and new business. Great, Ms. White Fox,
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair, we staff had a meeting with the Agricultural Society on Monday this week. And it was primarily to review the fall fair activities and with the parks construction, just talk about next steps with that. And it came up, a request came up for assistance in the fall fair. The Agricultural Society let staff know that each year they print approximately 2,000 pamphlets. So they're just one sheet of letter-sized paper folded in half, kind of shows the activities, the layout of the fair, just some information. And then they kind of distribute them at the library, at the office, etc. So they just shared with us that it's about 55 cents a page that they pay. It equals about $1,100 every year that they pay for this. And so they have requested the township to consider assisting them by printing those pamphlets at the office using our printer and our supplies. So from an operational standpoint, it's not a huge task for staff, given that they're creating the pamphlet and we're simply pressing print and then giving the documents back to them. There would be a small cost and kind of just the wear and tear on the equipment that would be for the township to take a look at when considering this, but overall staff feel like this is something that could be supported and just continue kind of that assistance with the Agricultural Society and we're kind of conducting this community event.
Okay, questions, comments?
Yeah, I have no problem supporting it. Did they get a grant this year from us? They did, you know,
It was 5K.
so this is a fraction, you know, of that. Yep, no, I'm in support for sure.
Councilor Hurst.
I'm also in support. It seems from a staff management standpoint, it's not a huge undertaking. My only comment would be is we should document that as a in-kind and supportive of the Ag Society so that it gets captured in the larger corporate budgetary coffers. Because I'm presuming it's a leased printer in the office and there would be per paper cost associated with that. That'd be my assumption. So just as long as that cost is allocated as donation or however you want to coin it from a financial standpoint to the Ag Society.
You, Mr. Chair, I think I'll take a look at that with our Director of Finance. We provide similar assistance to the Optimist Club for Remembrance Day. So we'll take a look at that in general, just how that's captured.
Councilor Brady.
Yeah, no problem. I don't.
I don't have any either, so, need a resolution?
I do have one prepared. Whereas the Agricultural Society has expressed a need for the township to support relating to its advertising for the fall fair and has specifically requested the township assist with the printing of the fall fair pamphlets, as this cost to the organization is approximately $1,100 per year. The council directs staff to assist the Ag Society by printing the pamphlets utilizing the township printer and paper supply.
Okay, moving second, Council Doyle, second, Council Hurst, all in favor? Thank you. Confirmatory by law.
The following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw number 2023-036. Being the bylaw, to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Clifton held on this meeting 16th day of August 2023.
Moving second, Council Hurst, Council Bailey, all in favor? Thank you. And adjourned.
Council hereby adjourns at 2:52 p.m.
Okay, mover, Council Bartle, second, Council Bailey, all in favor? Thank you.
There was a ton of motion.